Hey, good morning, class. Did I give you a little bit of a tease with the introduction? This is a fun class, and it started quite by accident in that I was in a workshop, and a student was practicing spray bottle, actually was splattering with the brush, and their neighbor had to put up shields because what they were practicing was kind of landing a little bit farther than they had intended. So as I came by and I saw some of those splatter marks on one of the shields, it was actually an old painting. And I go, oh, I'm sorry, it didn't mean for you to ruin this painting. And they go, oh no, that thing, I'm gonna throw it away. And I go, wait a minute, don't throw it away. I said, it just needs a little bit of this or that. And yeah, right. And I said, okay, let me sit down, I'll show you. So I was sitting down working on their painting and didn't realize the entire class had come around and were so fascinated by a couple of the changes on what they saw as a throwaway painting. And I resurrected it, and I got a bigger applause for the 10 minutes of fixing that painting than I did for the 2-hour morning demo. So I said, hey, I might have something here. It seems like this really helped them learn a lot. So it had progressed into a book and something I do constantly in the workshop. So happy to add it to this portfolio of classes, although it's been like a month, so I've got to have something extra other than just 3 classes a month that you can join me with. So I'm working on that, some Zoom classes as well, so I can help you with your paintings as well as still do some of the specialty techniques. So I have got 12 or 15 different things that I want to show you. So I want to get right away. Feel free to type in some questions. We'll take a short break down the road, and you get to watch this again, and you can see the before and after of some of the actual paintings. I've taken some photographs, so a couple of them I will email you to have as well. So they're good ways to learn about improving, but it all comes with a little caveat. What was your plan or your intention? So take a look at the chart here. And as I'm going to be making a lot of changes for some of the paintings that you have sent in, keep in mind my reason for change is not to improve the accuracy of detail and realism, as to how the picture might be. In fact, somebody had sent me, a photograph reference. Thank you very much. And they did a super job of painting it the way the photograph had improved. So my question to them before I work on their painting, what was your purpose? So my purpose is not about being realistic, not to saying painting realistic isn't art, so I have to kind of qualify when I show this chart, but I want to be more creative. So think of that. If your plan was realism and detail, get a picture, get a small brush, do exactly as it says in the photograph. I don't find that rewarding enough, so I want to add a little bit my personality, my little creativity along the way, which means instead of detail, I might brighten up the color. I might add a little more color variety. It may not be accurate to where the sunlight is, but it's going to have some energy of light and shadow, which means there's going to be some darks and some lights. I keep it loose. Haven't finished the window, so let your imagination finish the window and so forth. So there's things I'm doing along the way, and that's the whole purpose of this particular class, is to make the end result more visually attractive. And sometimes the answer to that is to make it different than what reality is. So reality might have said, okay, this side of the building is in shadow and it's casting a shadow that way, but I felt it was better to have a shadow on this side of the building and light on this side. So I have 2 different sources of light because I'm not worried about source of light always, and that's not my way to make a better painting, is just having a source of light and getting it more like the photograph. So here's a checklist that we're going to use as I go through and make some changes to a lot of the paintings. And you'd be wise to, write this down when you watch this in rerun, press stop and photograph this chart so that you can have it as a checklist guide. I use it in my workshops for a checklist before you start. How about the shapes? Are they okay? The value change and so forth. I use it as a checklist when you're done. Let's go back and review. I mean, is that shape an interesting shape? Did you do some value change? Is there some dark in front of light and light in front of dark and so forth? So it's going to be a guide to help you with some of the 7 or more common problems, prior to doing the painting. So here is what I have as a chart for you. And you can see already how much I have changed from the actual realism in the photograph. So let's, review the first painting. And so if I was wanting to make it picture perfect, there's only one way to paint this barn and the wagon. That's it. I'm done. But if I was wanting to be more creative and artistic, there's a version of how this could be made into a painting of a wagon and a barn. And here's the same exact wagon and barn, a little bit more what I call the wow factor, where I'm exaggerating something other than the objects or just color and contrast. So here's a checklist that's going to help you along the way. And think of it, as once in a while. So not every painting has to be wrought with, these exaggerated colors, the strongs, lights and darks, special effect of sunlight or shadow and so forth. My point is, I want to expand what you do and the way you make your art. Not necessarily every time am I going to have that kind of energy of color and power of contrast and radiant, focal point. Once in a while, here's a prime example. This one isn't, overdone, with an excessive amount of exaggerated color, but it still has a value change. It still has an area of emphasis and so forth. And it just doesn't, push the envelope, over the top once in a while. And I have other examples as well. Point being, if you look at some of these and go, oh, that's not for me. Once in a while, let it be for you. Try out doing something a little unique and special. So let's go back to that chart. Is the painting going to be better or different? So if you're going to paint another painting the way it's been painted 100 times before, don't expect too much excitement from you or from someone else viewing the painting. I think about when I'm making a painting, will it surprise the viewer? Are they used to seeing it this way? Then what else can I do that's slightly different? Here's a perfect example. This will surprise the viewer, seeing a wagon in a barn with that type of sunset, just right there at that particular point. And so that's a little way of surprising the viewer. And that's why I painted this. I wanted to do something different or special. So have a reason why you're painting, and you'll catch yourself from saying the word nice and ordinary. Will the painting hold their attention? We talked about the wow factor, something unique and different. I make paintings to make the viewer feel good, showing some originality, and some creativity along the way. Now, as I'm about to dive in, I want to share with you, there's a couple of products or techniques that you could take advantage of that will assist you in making some of these changes. And this is a sheet of called wet media acetate. Another trade name for it, one of the companies that makes it calls it Duralar. And the idea behind it is that you can paint watercolor on it. So let's say you were thinking about having another fence post, closer, having another shadow. Now there's a lot of glare there, but you can see how I'm able to paint, right on this. And now I can watch this. I can just move that particular thing around. Maybe I want to put the fence over here. Maybe I want to move it over there and add another one. Do I want to just have one or two? And so you see where you can explore adding the color or adding a value or adding a detail, making some of these changes right there while you're looking at your painting. You can get a feel for, yep, that might just give it a little extra pop if I was to increase that contrast, have some more interesting shadow patterns, coming from it. So this wet media acetate, and the nice thing about it is it's reusable, so you can just wipe it away. Now, normal acetate watercolor paint beads up, and floats off of. So this is called wet media acetate. It's a great little product to help you look at making some of the changes. Another thing that you can do, I had this done in my workshops where I have a returning student. I have them print out some of their images, in color on a copy machine. And so what's the advantage there is that you can try making some corrections or changes right there on that particular printout. So this isn't the actual painting, but this is a printed version of their painting. And so my thought was maybe the colors, for that focal point area could be a little brighter. Maybe the contrast in and around that section of the painting, could be a little stronger. And so I can get this idea of corrections that I might make on the final painting. I can explore or experiment with them on this wet medium.
Of this?
I'm sorry?
Did you take a picture of the before?
Yes, I actually have another printout.
Oh, okay, good.
Thanks, Linda. So having this printout, I have the chance to play with, and if I didn't like how it turned out, I just go print out another one. So one of the items I was thinking about in this particular correction is to have the focal point just pop out a little bit more. Now there may be an issue, I didn't see the actual painting. Sometimes there's the issue of the quality of the copy that I made or that they sent. But here is the point, simple enough. I'm gonna just get some blue here, and making some of these changes on a printout version. And so you'll feel a little bit braver and more adventurous because you're not taking a chance that is going to be locked in. And so here's a touch of improving this painting by having the focal point just pop out a little more. I was looking for the name on this one. I thought this might have been Bill's. And so now I have a reason for the eye to go to this particular section of the painting. Contrast is a little stronger. I'm going to still even darken the back side of this building a touch more, carry that shadow somewhat off the page. Slowly end that green contrast. Hit a little dark accent underneath the vehicle as well. So I'm watching and careful for when I make these corrections that I don't somewhat impose my style on the style that has already been established by the artist. So there's a looser, more colorful style. I like the way this one. So now I have a reason for the eye to go to that one particular area. And so the nice thing about it, here's the before. So you can see how it was. Your eye might have gone to the porch or to that window or just this yellow and purple combination. But there's not enough variety of things for that to be the focal point. So I've now given that idea of focusing in on, let me take you just a little closer. And so here's a fun way that you could experiment with making some changes. So let's take a look at the before. So there's how it was, which I like the looseness of color. I like the looseness of what they painted. I might not have left the very light background, that much, but I don't think it's wrong and needed to be fixed. But I felt there was a need to bring the eye into the painting and stay in one area a little bit longer. And so here's where I popped that cleaner green. Still made good use of that beautiful yellow that you have on the side of the building, but just made the side of the building a little darker and popped out a little more color. So it isn't just the car, but also the wall, that little green bush, and a touch of the red car, even the purple of the wall. So there is a variety. So I hit upon, we're going to come back and do things with focal point as well. But the point is, here's a great way for you to kind of sneak up on making a correction to your final painting, is to experiment with it using either the wet media acetate or a printout. Now, sometimes copy machines print out and it's hard to paint on them. I'm not sure what it is, the type of ink or whatnot, but I printed this out on what's called cardstock, which is a little thicker sheet of paper than copy paper. So copy paper is really thin. This is about 120-pound weight compared to the 80 or 90-pound weight that the copy machine paper has. So there's a way to help you build a little bit of success. So we'll kind of dive into now some of the paintings that were sent out. I'll offer some suggestions along the way. Question, I got Linda here to help out. If you have a question about what colors and so forth, I always suggest check my website. It's easier to know the range of colors, which darks, that's blue and danthorine. And I don't know how to spell blue and danthorine well enough to tell you for my darks. But now you have an idea of where I'm coming from. I'm interested in being more artistic and creative. I'm not trying to capture the reality of the scene. So once in a while, all of us, I've got many a quarter sheet painting that began as a full sheet. And sometimes you might want to crop the painting, for success. So this particular section here, it needs a value change and needs a little depth, color matches, but there's kind of a feeling of half the painting, has this very close value range, and the other half has a variety of values. And so I really think the success for this one really is, let's eliminate a good amount of the problem of that right-hand side. And let's just come over here and maybe bring out a little more of a focal point. Might carry, some of these darks across the bottom so they don't just become this one little dark spot. And so I might introduce a few, rocks over here. And I like this idea of that focal point glowing in the background. So I'll play with that idea. So normally in class, I just go ahead and put a knife down the side of this and cut it. But I'll send this back to them in tech and talk about the suggestion of having there be a line. And I made it to just draw a line down the center where I want to crop this so I can even see where I'm wanting it to end. All right. Even helpful for me is to not even have that particular side there, so I'm going to put a towel even, because my eye will keep going back over to that section and wanting to fix it. So I just have a feeling of this dark is just very heavy on one side of the painting, so I'll carry that dark just a little bit further and over across the bottom, whether it be bushes or leaves or rocks. And so there'll be just, and I have to go past what is the center of the painting. And so since I've cropped it here, I can add the little touch of bushes or shrubs, the deciduous appearance that is on the right-hand side of the painting. I'll use a sponge to get a little different look and might overlap a touch of the boat instead of having it sterile and stay away from. So that links this dark all the way across. I'll pop out the focal point just a little more in a moment. Have a touch of a little definition between this tree trunk and maybe another one at the same time. So I have some positive and negative. Since I've introduced that rock pattern, I'll carry that idea just a little further and over. Bring some of the cool violet that you have in the sky down and into a touch of the boat as well. So this is a little touch of unity. And I have others that will talk about just those single topics like unity. Again, what I'm trying to get across here is once in a while crop the painting, and then instead of fighting to repair a certain particular section of the painting, a little bit of a value shift here. A little color variety. I'm going to take some of those oranges that you have beautifully in the background, add them a touch to the front. So the unity of color. And I think the focal point glows nicely back there. So I'll stay with it. Instead of making the obvious choice, the boat is the focal point, I think the idea of it being back in here has a breath of fresh air and not the singularity of just a boat item. Whether that's a house or a building, not sure. Don't want to be that particular about it. You have a wonderful loose impressionism in the painting. I want to change a little bit of the color in a few places so it's not all orange for the palm tree. So some of this green, now I'm doing a unity of color. As I brought some of the purples to harmonize in unity downward, and I'm bringing a unity of color up as well. A little extra edge and contrast for that. And just a bit of an edge in that focal point area. So you get to see a couple extra items other than just one item, the cropping alone. But I think this made it really, showing it really had a good painting over on this side. And there wasn't as much definition on the right-hand side. And so now I'll keep the viewer's eye into this section of the painting. I'm going to have a bit of an edge. So I saw no edges here. And so I felt there needs to be a touch of an edge, hard edge, on this part of the painting. Not that I'm doing detail, it's just a matter, it was all soft, wet into wet. A nice little lush feeling to the forest here, close to the shoreline. A couple accents, some secret sauce, a little extra darks. little transition between the water value and the shoreline. These are very close to each other, so I'll do a little dry brush in here. So establish this is a shoreline, slightly different in appearance than would be the water. So you had a very similar smooth appearance there. Now then this roughness, and starting to somewhat surround that focal point with just a touch more edge. I'm going to color harmony, bring a little bit of this green in, make it a little lighter value. So some of the greens that's over here, that's why I'm introducing this green as well. You may not see in reality that there was a reflection. So I'm doing things for the painting. I'm not doing things based on reality. There would probably be no chance you'd see a reflection of this distant hill in the water, but I want to find a way to bring a touch of that color green into the water to harmonize as well. And a couple little dots of darks to bring out our focal point. Take back that just a touch. So the main lesson was to share with you the idea of cropping for success. And I think that, so you might have a lot of good parts of the painting, and our eye always gets stuck on what's wrong. This is something wrong, I got to fix this. And so sure, we could have lifted off some paint and reworked that particular section. My thought is to keep it in a positive mode and deal with this part of the painting working well. I like the lost and found. Notice you don't see the boat, snap right away. That's another reason for it not to be the focal point. And let your eye just go back here to where the colors are brighter. I like those oranges, popped a little bit of red, added an edge here, added an edge to it there. Kind of brought this dark so that it wasn't just one spot of dark, kind of carried it around. So now it's part of the darks that are in the front of the painting. And I think that's the best answer for this particular painting. And I have another one taking that same idea of let's crop away. So don't feel bad about it. All of us are going to have this. I have a ton of paintings that the bits and pieces were cut away, and you have no idea that there was a good painting hiding somewhere nearby. For example, this one. So again, I like the parts of this quite well, but there's kind of a disconnection. I'm going to bend this and straighten it out for you. So it's kind of a disconnection. The rock, the mountain, the shoreline, lost and found of the, even the lighthouse, crashing waves, a little pattern for the water. It's really a good little piece. Then I like this shoreline. I got the lost and found between wet and dry sand, this foreground rocks. You have the figures on the beach. So there's a nice airy feeling to this, but there doesn't seem to be a connection. There's also we're going to touch on soon, and that's composition. There's a bit of a compositional issue where this mountain comes down and really almost stops, cuts the painting in half. And so that's exactly what I have here. Is I'm going to suggest for the painter that they have two different parts. And that one I am going to cut for them, and I'll send them back both halves. So I better do a good job on this, because otherwise they're going to be pretty mad at me. So because of the idea of trying to focus on one half while the other half isn't quite finished. And there's another thing that watercolorists, boy, we are so stuck on. Every day it's either going to be a half sheet, a full sheet, or a quarter sheet. And the thought of having a cropped painting, is like, oh my gosh, I'm not used to doing that. And here's the beauty of this very wide, very horizontal. Now I'm going to enhance a little bit of the glow of the light and put a strong contrast in front of it and to help just bring out a little more of the focal point area in the painting. I know you mean for it to be there. It might have been exactly correct when the color was wet and then the color dried, and now you don't have a chance to see. So I got to clear out some of the greens from the previous painting. So crop for success, find a good part of it, save that particular part. And here probably the answer is to maybe just enhance a little bit of the focal point area in the painting.
Tom, a quick question.
Sure, Linda.
If we need to crop the painting, do we need to worry about the shape of the final paper?
Absolutely.
For
In fact,
aesthetics, dimensions, or framing?
I think the beauty of that, let's see if I'm on frame here. The beauty of that is to have a variety of sizes and shapes. If you have a chance, Josh, would you grab the really skinny frame painting on the wall that's horizontal. I'll show you. I do the same thing. And so I have a wall here, and I have anything from a 30 by 60-inch painting to a 10 by 20. Just the one's good for just for showing. I have a 8 by 10. So my answer to your question is this: variety is a beautiful thing. And so for me as well, I have on the wall right behind you a 30 by 60 painting, and right next to it is a 10 by 20. So I think the idea of giving the viewer variety of shapes and sizes and proportions. Now, I struggle with composition on a perfect square, 12 by 12, 16 by 16. Albert Handel, he could do a fantastic job and make it work. I have yet to figure out. For me, it's just too much symmetry on all four sides and to get the balance of a focal point and whatnot. So that's kind of off topic, but you could do a round, you could do a horizontal, could do vertical. Right next to the painting as well, probably have one close by. I have one that's a 10 by 20 as a vertical. And so point being, variety of sizes is great. Go for it. Everything either being half sheet, quarter sheet, or full sheet. You've got 3 sizes. That's just 3. I've got on the wall behind a dozen different sizes. So embrace the idea of variety of sizes. And it pretty much works pretty well for this particular painting. It's telling the story of this wide expansed view that you have in this particular scene. And so there's a beauty to it. Now, still give it a nice border. And so here's a 3.5-inch mat. So there's a nice space around it, but this story is really a very horizontal story. I love the work on the rocks and the water. I just want to enhance, as I said, just the focal point because the eye is just kind of wandering away and doesn't want to come back as well. So there's an answer to your question, and I'm glad you brought it up. Thanks for your help, Josh and Linda, for bringing it to me. So I'm going to enhance the glow, and just that warmer orange. I'm not going to get too wild at the top. I'll go into the rose colors that you have.
Tom, you should say that when you usually cut someone's painting in half, you hear a
big groan.
Big groan or like panic.
Well, we do hand out tissues for the person that's crying for the painting that's now. And I'm also good at fixing both halves when I do that. So that's the good news is you're going to get 2 paintings out of the deal. So I'm going to do real wide cloud patterns across this color that I have enhanced. So we'll exchange the craziness of cutting your painting in half for you get 2 paintings when you're all done. Hope that's a fair trade. A little color in the bottom, a quick dry, and then I add a little more contrast. So I want to take the eye away from that particular focal point spot. I especially like this if this is a lighthouse, that it isn't featured as the main element. I think that's a breath of fresh air. So against that golden sky, I'm going to put a nice radiant warm. So the sky is having an effect on this landscape here, just warming up that one particular section of the rocks, and then I'll slowly transition out of that red into a purple. That can make that easier transition into a green. Red doesn't transition to green by itself that well, so I need a crossover color. So something in between the red warm or the orange, red-orange warm. So I'm showing that this radiant sky is having an effect on the landscape. And I wanted to punch just a little more of the contrast. That's in and around that area. Just a tiny little bit of warm on the other side. A lot of times you make a change like this, I don't see it until I've made the change that I need to now harmonize that shift. So I need to bring the touch of that dark over to the other side of the painting a touch more. Otherwise it's too fast of a shift of color and value. Bring in just a hair amount of warmth into the ground, water in this case. So I'm showing the effect. I've created that enhanced warm glow. Now I want to take some of those warm glow parts and just tag parts of the painting so this warm is radiating into the painting. Now here's where realistically it probably wouldn't be seen. And so artistically, I'm doing this to harmonize, to extend that glow of warmth in a few other areas. In reality, this would be backlit, very dark. You wouldn't see that kind of color. So I make choices on what's better for the painting. This is for harmony and unity and helping extend the feel that you have, or that I've now exaggerated to have in the painting. And so here's where, forget about the photograph, and let's make some art decisions. And just an accent of warmth on this one as well. So the beauty of this, and I encourage you as well, watch this program and rerun, take a picture of the before and afters, and save those for yourself. So you get this idea, because I'm going to touch on all the common problems that may have taken place. So now you feel how your eye wants to go to that particular section. I had drawn in there, don't know that I need them quite as much, but I'll put them in anyway, a couple of sailboats. I don't need to make them that strong, but a hint of them and making them warm just adds that little extra snap to bring your eye in that particular area. So once again, I can't say enough about looking at it behind a mat and seeing it. And you want to stand back, see it from a distance. And so now it's got a very horizontal feel to it. You're exaggerating the width of the painting and the horizontal aspect of the painting. And you've exaggerated the warmth, and you've accented some of those warmths elsewhere, and just given a little pop for a stronger focal point. So whereas the other half, which isn't going to need quite as much. And again here, I want to play with the horizontal aspect that I've exaggerated now by the cutting, and play with these wide, horizontal, curvilinear shoreline patterns. And so I'm going to play with a sweeping left and right. Don't need to show what is above here, meaning I don't have to show the land above the water. The water just disappear out into here. So I'm playing up the wide width because of the cropping of the painting, and bring that play of wide in through the wet and dry sand. Patterns, and in a moment through some reflections and shadow. So I had those be a transition to a little more of a warm color. This is just a soft edge that I'm softening on one side, leaving the hard edge here. I'll come back to a hard edge right in there. So I don't have the wide mountain in this particular one, so I'm playing with wide shoreline, water and wet sand patterns. Here comes a light little cerulean blue. So I'm having slowly these wide patterns. So you almost don't see where the blue ends and the brown begins. Then I'll do a quick dry, hit a shadow as well. And maybe a color shift for the animals so they're not both the same yellow. Play a little both reflection pattern from them, as well as a pop a little contrast. So I like the idea of the dog's perfect example of having not just the figure hold the viewer's interest. And that's why I want to take and throw a little shadow as well. There is such a thing as a shadow on water. Don't see it enough. Anchors this to the ground as well. So, and again, just a few little reflection patterns that continue a little longer. Just a little burst of color on this one part of the body there. Take a little burst of color, a little orange, got a little red. And so I think here, just a small little amount of brush stroke. Sometimes the look of detail is a phrase I use a lot in a painting, and so here I'm not introducing any more detail. I'm not putting buttons and a nose on the figure, but by having these small little patterns, or even the little dry brush of the water. So now there's a nice little soft, gentle, golden feel to the painting. And it isn't just the single figure, it's not just the dog alone. I think there's a nice interaction between primary and secondary areas of emphasis. So you have the beauty of, I have to resort back to my camera shot of these that I have taken the before and after. So I think it was too much work to try and join these two parts together. And so here's an answer for improving a painting is cropping it. And so I think we have two winning paintings here, successful paintings here. The beauty of that all by itself, it's got a little more energy and value change and so forth. And I think the little soft, delicate play of what's taking place in the water, nice little delicate walk along the beach as a way in which to improve a painting. So crop the painting for success. And that one worked, so we will
I do have a question. Where will the focal point be?
On this particular one, the primary is going to be the figure. I've got two elements, and also, thanks for mentioning that, because I want to bring a little red into the reflection. So I have the primary. So there's not two focal points, but there is a word primary. I'm bringing down the red. So I have a primary area, and I have a secondary. Tertiary, if you want to even call the rocks, but probably not as much. I like the angle of the rocks. And so I want to have a way in which for you to get back and forth from each of them. And so that's where I had this little play of pattern in the water, kind of connecting all the way across from one. And so there's almost a line guiding you to be, that's why I had the shadow as well, which I'll increase, a touch more as a means to get from one part to another. And so they're linked through that little shadow. And not a lot of edge, not a lot of color, not a lot of contrast. If anything, this might be a little too bright. Can smudge and take away a touch of that in the foreground there. So the answer being focal point one, secondary maybe, as long as they have a chance to get linked back and forth. Ideally, probably this could be on a different plane, could have been a lower, a little higher, instead of on the same plane as this one, but that's a composition issue, which I'm going to go to next. So did that answer that question, I hope? So crop for success and let the painting continue. So here's a really good little piece, and I'm kind of worried about making too many changes on it, because here's where I have to have a conversation. Now we're going to talk about composition as a way to improve the painting. And based upon the fact they sent me the photograph, prop that up so you don't see the glare as much. There we go. I'll do it that way. So I assumed their reason for making the painting was to have it be an accurate portrayal of the place. And so you have done a fine job. I'm a little concerned with, in this particular one, what it was you're trying to say. Now, in that I mean, let's establish a priority. Sometimes the painting is more about the sky. Sometimes it's more about what's happening on the ground. One of the earlier ones, this is more about the water and the shoreline. This is a painting I want to talk about the land mass and so forth. This painting they wanted to have as their primary element be the building. So I don't have a feel as, was it the water as a primary, or was it the building as a primary? Was it the sky? I love that stratus sky taking place. So in this cropping for success idea, you want to take a look at this painting could have been portrayed as being one featuring maybe the water and the reflections. So let's crop away this particular part. Now let me get a different mat instead of the L pieces, what I have here before. So here's now here's now the painting has a story to tell. It's primarily about the river, the water, and the reflections. Secondary, it's about the land mass, be it architecture or the grass, and last about the sky. Or here it's more about the sky, a little less about the buildings, and a smaller amount being the water. And so I kind of, in my composition, I like to prioritize the different elements. What is it mostly? Or at least these are, think of it as just having different proportions. Because at this moment, there's a very equal amount of proportion to the sky. Take that same caliper. There's an equal amount of land, and there's an equal amount of water. And so if reality was what you wanted, you got it. I think one of the issues that could come into play along with composition. So composition is the proportions that you're assigning different elements to be in the painting. There's another element in composition, and that's the design, meaning the shapes of the items. And so when I assign, a building or a hill or a tree, I always look out for having it conform to a circle or a square or a rectangle or a triangle or a straight line. Try to avoid that, or avoid a look at something that's very static looking. And so here I've taken a 3/4 angle to looking at a building, extended the eave, added a chimney and so forth, all to break up seeing circle, square, rectangle, triangle, and straight line. So that building is a little harshly rectangle. The tree is a little harshly circular. And so even in the wanting to do a little bit more detail and realism in your way of painting, there's a way in which that you can fool the viewer and have the shapes of the items be slightly more visually attractive. And so here's a trick that you can apply for that. Were you to have such as shadows, be thick and thin, underneath, it breaks up the architecture, so I'm extending the shadows. I'm going to green up one, but still trying to maintain your realism. I might extend that particular architecture feature a little taller for the tower. So let's raise that tower. No one will know, even people that live there or work there, won't notice that there's that little bit of change you've made to having the tower a touch higher and the flag a touch bigger on the top. And so there's a way into fooling the eye. A way to fix also the shape of that tree, if you can't find where it ends because it disappears into the shadow, now then, we can't really call it quite that circle shape. Although I will take and modify just a touch. See if I can find the same warm green. And so a slight improvement of the shapes, just a few branches or leaves coming out onto one side, not seeing where that tree ends, exaggerating a little more the abstract shape of shadows. So we can still stay in your realism manner, but the shadows can give a little more artistic variety to the shapes. Make that shadow shape in there. A couple of shadow shapes here. So look how I've created that little cast shadow pattern. Having reflections not be quite as perfect of a circle, so I feel that circle shape. So remember we had the circle square. We changed the square. We changed the straight line at the top of the building by raising the tower just a touch. If we have the shadow patterns, kind of have a little more broken, long and short look to them. And I won't do the exact thing on the other side. So there's another answer to how to fix a painting, and watch out for the word same. So I'm not going to have the shadows on one of them be as long as I meant to say shadow, I meant to say reflection. And I'll connect this. So I'm going to have that be a softer edge so I can't see the rest of that perfect circle there. A little bit of color harmony. Let's take some of the blue of the sky and harmonize into, so I'll take this building over on this side and the shadow on this building. So I'm bringing some of that blue sky into the bottom, so it's a little unity factor. It started out really as composition, and while I still believe in cropping it, I won't do it for you. I'll let you make a choice which way you want to have that be cropped. I have a little bit more value change on one side to go along with the value of the dark tree. Felt it was a little lonely. Have a little roof there. You can add a little chimney up here if you want to. Change that straight line as well. I was always made fun of in college because all my barns had television and electricity and flush toilets because the roof line had all these little posts and stacks and patterns on the top of them. And so they made fun of my urban approach to rural farms. And now I'll bring a little color harmony. I'm going to take a touch of the ochre warmth that you have in the building into a portion of the sky. So just a touch of that same yellow ochre, just to either 1/3 or 2/3. So we'll just have 1/3. So a little bit of warmth in a couple of the areas. Take a touch of that blue that's in the sky and bring it, looks like a cobalt blue, bring it down. So here comes a cobalt blue for part of the shadows in here. Touch of that same warmth. So for a touch of the building, but bigger, simpler patterns versus the tiny little ones that you have. So that harmonized the warmth. I'm going to carry that all the way across the painting as well. I don't look for mirror image shadows or reflections, larger or smaller than what's causing them, so it's more visually attractive. So now there's a lot of warmth taking place. I have a little more warmth on this part of the sky, close to that section. I added just a little extra. Once I put this down here, I felt I needed another touch of it upstairs. And so let's take and go back to that cropping off particular idea and see which you want to have as your primary. Do you want to have it be primarily about the reflections? Now, that doesn't mean it won't tell you a story about the building and any of the architecture or the place. It's a matter of different proportions in each of these areas. So I'll go even smaller. So I want to look at the size of this, and the sky is being even smaller. I did the something already, but that's all right. So we have large water, medium size for the land, and small size for the sky. Or we could go larger with the sky and smaller with the water, and medium size. So we got large, medium, and then small size there. So there would be my suggestion to improve the composition, which are the proportions of the different items. So you have different proportions of each of those versus at this particular stage, there is that same amount of water, same amount of land, and same amount of very similar amount to the sky. We've hidden a little bit the shape of the circle. We've taken the tower a touch taller. We've broken up the rectangle of the roof with the cast shadows to them. Brought a little bit of the color harmony. Some of the warms up and then some of the cools down. So there's a little bit more color harmony. Slightly hidden. You don't see perfectly the two circle shapes in the center. So there's a issue for composition. And we stayed relatively close to your way of painting, which I don't want to take away and say it has to be, always, loose and stylized and energized with the color and contrast. So we stayed into your look of realism, but I think have improved a touch of the composition. And so there's a thought on an important element. We should probably repeat that class, have another class on the composition soon, because that is such a high key one. So let's go now and take a look at having some value change to improve the painting. And there might be a crossover of color harmony in this one as well, but we'll touch on, I think, first and foremost, you have a nice focal point, good area of emphasis. And then I think what's missing is either lights and darks throughout the painting or a better value change between the front and the back. The sky area is a very important section of the painting where you need to have a value shift. So both the ground, which is the horizontal plane in a painting, need to have some kind of a value change or it will stand up like the wall. So this wall doesn't have to have a value change from top to bottom. It's a wall. It's standing up. It's vertical. But when you're dealing with the sky and the ground, you have a couple different ways of having an improvement to them. Either a slow, small, gradual shift, front's darker, middle, go into a lighter value, or sections of value change. So there is that feeling of distance. You're looking into the painting. You know, got close and now you're looking depth, creating that depth. Whereas that sky here does not quite have a value shift. Ground does, a little bit of a light going to dark because of that light coming through. So let me improve that value change to the sky first so it doesn't have a look like it's a wall. I think I'll leave it lighter here and go darker at the top, following some of the colors, you know, that are already in the painting. All right, clean palette, ready to go. So I look at the painting and what colors to use. You've got a lot of these rose and violet colors, so I don't want to introduce a new color. That's part of unity for the painting. So let's come off with that cobalt magenta that you have in the violets that you're using and start with that color, darker at the top. Kind of shift and go around. Might have been a situation where here's where you could have used a little liquid frisket on top of the dry color. Yeah, make a list for me if you would, hon, for the December, so I can put that up at the break too.
I don't remember what we said we were doing. I'll find them. I brought them here.
So dark, go into light, and let this be even lighter, so having a value change. You can have a little bit of an edge going on in there. So now that sky has close and far, and that's a real important part of that particular fix. And add little accents of color changes as this dries. So there's a little bit of an edge. So that was a cobalt blue mixed in with permanent magenta, and now a little bit of a yellow ochre. And so I'm taking that same yellow ochre, and I want to introduce a little cloud-like pattern, a little bit of an edge, because this is not all that soft. So I feel a need for a touch of an edge. Take a lot of it. Oh, I can do a little lifting off as well. Watch this. Oh, you're getting to see lots of painting techniques today. Look how I've got a little light in front of dark. And so I painted, this was dry, almost perfectly dry. Then I went ahead and scratched in this particular cloud, and then I just lifted off. So this was able to re-wet that, and then I tissue it off, and I got back to what was the original value of this one. And so that's where I was able to play with the idea of both what I call positive and negative. Light in front of dark, dark in front of light, more visually interesting. And it has nothing to do with where the source of light is and how that could possibly happen. Just looking for a touch of an edge. So that before I felt the all soft sky didn't match that well in the painting. Choosing to do a stratus type cloud, which is more architectural looking, because we have primarily a lot of architectural aspects in the painting. All these very man-made, architectural. I don't feel the rounded cumulus, cloud was going to be as visually attractive. Okay, so I feel the amount of edging and so forth that I have in the rest of the painting, or that you have, matches now in the sky. There's a value change. Focal point still works. It's a little close to the middle. I might leave that for a while. It isn't the ideal spot, but to have one is better than to not have one, so I'm not going to angst over that position of it. But I'm going to surprise you with, I think, a strong value change to the foreground. And here's where that wet media acetate might come into play, where I'm thinking about making these darker and silhouette in the front. And so here's how I can just play with, would this still work? And I'll have definition of color, and still you'll see the heads, shoulders, and so forth. But would this big value shift in the front create a nice feeling of distance and depth to the ones in the back? I think he had added an umbrella to his. And so there's where I wanted to give that value change. Look how it popped out the focal point. So I'm in favor of that idea. I need to do it with a variety of color. And so here's where that wet media acetate was. So told you it was going to be a fun class with lots of different things to see and do. And
Tom, can that, it gives a little shiny, wavy. Can you flatten that out?
yeah, I did the, that was the wet media acetate, thanks.
Right.
All right, let's have some nice contrast, some color, some lost and found, meaning I'll paint and then I'll leave some of it alone. I might leave, at this moment, the parts of the face to be shaded. So still show some lights and darks within that area. But mainly a nice dark sense to this grouping in the front to establish a big value change. Everybody's got their umbrellas up. And some value change to parts of this as well. Don't have to fill it all in to be a solid dark silhouette, but enough dark to identify that this grouping in front is more in shadow. And so if I can add more depth, here's my reason for all this. If I can add more depth, the viewer's not going to be struggling to want to see more detail. And so I'm replacing this need for something to look at. I'm making it a color shift. I want to connect these two umbrellas together. Having a value change a little bit here in shadow. Slowly, not having too much detail over in this corner of the painting. So the eye doesn't go over to that part too much. Just showcasing the planes of the face, the light and dark parts. And mainly this, at this point here, is where I need that shift. This is where I'm going to push this dark even darker, push this dark even darker. So you'll see at this intersection here, not worry about being super dark down here as I didn't down there, but having a nice dark to this whole grouping in the front. And I want to overlap a little bit the umbrella with another one. So we have a grouping of umbrellas. Nice, they make nice design shapes as they're grouped together. They make a bad shape if they're isolated by themselves. So as I slowly now come to the bottom of the painting, here's where I'm not going to have as much contrast. Beginning to get away from it. Still having some color change, still see the subtle shaped silhouette of the figure. And I'm going to also darken some shadows underneath them as well. So give the viewer something other than refinement. And my something extra is going to be these shapes, these value changes for the sense of close and far. And that should hold their interest. Let's have a green umbrella over here as well. Come close to, I might not intersect the head on the one. As I said, I'll darken some of the shadow parts left and right, play up this light coming through here. Almost have the rest of the figure disappear into the shadow section of the foreground. So a better feeling of close and far. And let that be the visual interest, the entertainment, I call it, for the viewer. Instead of buttons, windows, glasses, nose. So here I'm darkening some cast shadows on the ground or reflections or both. Closing out these corners so you don't see the eye. And I'll share with you another little trick for closing out the corners with my spray bottle. Just enhancing the pattern, the value change. Seems like, must be, then it means it works. I say that to myself. It seemed like an umbrella. It seemed like a grouping. A little bright color, strong value of light over on the side of the building. So the eye doesn't go to some of those cleaner, bright, warm colors. I'm going to take them away. I'm going to let the clean, bright colors stay within the painting. Can leave tiny little bits and pieces of it. I'm not concerned if it's a shadow or the reasoning behind. Since it's darker in front, I'm going to start going darker now to that side. But there's that phrase I've used many times. If you're new with me, thanks for joining us. I have a phrase I use in classes and workshops, and that's 80%. I get 80% of it showcased. I'm going to come back and finish it later when I never do. But I say that to myself just so I can stop short of over-painting, overdoing. I just feel a little bit of a darker value to parts of this as well. Somebody without an umbrella, they must be running. So there's incomplete dots and dashes. I didn't want to do the super dark up here. I did it darker lower because I don't have that sky to be that light of a value. And I'll take a portion of the right side, and then we'll stop and look at it behind the mat. We'll talk about matting as well. On how to review what you have. So here's where I'm not painting all of it. I'm going to just paint parts of this now. Wanted to get it slightly darker. Each window area, do something different than you have with the other one. By that I mean don't have them be the same pattern. I've got big dark here and nothing on the bottom right. Here I've got a little something on the bottom right. I'll make the figure, leave the wall dark or light, and I'll put the figure dark in front of it. Same as well here, dark in front of light, light in front of dark. And especially in this painting, it has a wonderful looseness and impressionism to it. hope you're watching, Mary. This is yours. I see your name on it.
Are you doing cooler umbrella foreground colors to contrast the warm buildings?
I don't want to do too much of that contrast. What I'm trying to do is more of a color harmony factor. So there's a lot of cool and warm in the front, and there's cool and warm going on in the middle, and I've got cool and warm going on the back. So I have taken that as a decision for that is the color unity. There's touches of cool and warm throughout the painting, and the grays, if they're there, they're a warm gray. So there's more warm. But to straight up answer your question, I'm mixing both because I saw that taking place already in the painting. You know, you have cool and then you have warm, and then you've got warm and then cool, and so you've done warm and cool mixing before. I was just adjusting the value so it was slightly darker on this side of the building, although not in this place, just for variety, because I did it all on this particular one. So I'm looking to see what's taking place in the painting. I would have had more cool colors back here, more warm colors in the front, but I have to go with what's taking place on the painting already and not introduce a whole new color shift. So now an important part of making a decision as to how it's coming along is looking at it behind a mat. And so I still feel the focal point works quite well. It could have just a few more pop darks just to bring out that focus to that area. Whether it be a window or a door or the balcony or what's on the ground, casting a shadow across. I don't want it to be just one figure, so this area is getting a little variety of enhancement. So kind of increasing, and also I can push that focus just a little bit out of dead center with a burst of color here. Not sure what it is, don't have to answer. Put some of Linda's flowers up in the balcony. There's a brilliant pink. So I'm bringing the isolation of that yellow at the end of the street, which is okay, but just taking a little more focus over to the yellow on this right-hand side. So this becomes the zone of, you know, the focal point. Got a nice bright yellow shirt here on him. Great job. And so I think I moved that focus just a little bit out of dead center, and it started there and it's working its way over to the right, which causes me now to take here's a very strong, cool color. This is my phthalo blue, and I'm putting it on the inside of this forward umbrella. Going to have it on the edge of this doorway, and a spot or two back here, just so that there's that little extra something that's only in that one section, that really strong sense of a very clean, cool color. So I've got the specialty of that particular area. So that focal point doesn't have to be everything that's in the same plane, meaning the background. I mean, a touch of the face, you know, is enhanced. I'll take you in close and see that I still left. So my focal point's almost part of the umbrella, a bit of the figure in front, and the yellow and reds that are in the brighter colors that are in that particular focal point area. Given a little more sense of depth, a biggest change I wanted to make, you know, notice was the sky shift. And so there's now is a better feeling of close and far. You get to back up. I don't have the color printout of this particular one. But I've increased the focal point, and I want to just quiet down this little light value that's in this section here, so there's not quite as much contrast. I don't want your eye to leave the painting through this opening that's right here at the bottom. So start off with a little cerulean and eliminate some of that light value ending or taking your eye out of the page. And so the eye kind of get down to this particular point, and I want to come back up and stay in the painting. And so I watch how my eye might move around a painting. And so I sense there was wanting to come down and leave. That's why I didn't do a lot of refinement of the figures and so forth. So now it ends. And so it just ends right across here. So you might kind of keep revolving in this particular section of the painting. Well, the big shift was, which we talked about and I wanted to make some strong value change. It's a way in which you can get away from detail. It gives the viewer something to hold on to, meaning I look at this and immediately I sense the depth, and then I zoom into, you got a great perspective shift, on the buildings. The eye kind of where it just shoots right into that particular section. Now, what's happening in that particular section is a light value. Now, I want to enhance the idea of that light value, and so here's where I would suggest this being showcased in a dark mat, because I have mostly dark right up near the edge of the mat, even up here, mostly dark. Whereas the light value, I'm seeing this contrast. I'm seeing this contrast and this contrast. Oh, am I seeing a lot of that contrast down there? Now, that doesn't mean you couldn't have a tiny little, a fillet of an 1/8 inch or so of a liner being a light value. But the dark is going to help you see or tell the viewer where to go, and I want them to go into this focal point where it's lighter, and actually the dark mat can make the painting look lighter. A light mat can make you see the heaviness of dark value, and so I want them to enjoy the feeling of the light that's in the painting, which is in that section, and that brings out the light even more. Light of the sky is brought out by the dark of the mat, and the rest of the painting that's mid-tone and dark just kind of melts into the mat, and you don't see much or want to go to that intersection between the mat and the painting. I want them to go in the particular part of the painting. So let value change be a way in which you can avoid some of the detail, can make the painting more interesting, and the viewer has that to hold on to, seeing that kind of a value shift for more interest. And let's take that same value change idea and work on another one. So I bet you're having fun. I know I am. And we're seeing some great changes. I'll email to you some of the before and afters as well to some of these as a follow-up to the class. So if you don't get a good camera picture of it, I will have taken a picture and send that to you. So there's a bit of value change I was going to add to that one. Also, another way to fix a painting is to showcase or exaggerate sunlight and shadow. And so that is a play that I'm going to add to this, is to have a stronger feeling of either sunlight in it or, in this case, shadow coming across it. There's a bit of a problem, and something that I suggest frequently is to take your painting and turn it upside down. And if you see something radically different, now you're able to focus in on what I call the abstract of the painting. I see value, I see color, I see areas, I look at contrast, I see edges, and one of the issues that I see here is a unity factor. So I'm going to touch on unity in another one, but there's a little bit of a unity fix that can happen here. Very blue here, and the rest, the 2/3 of the painting, is very brown. And so blue is cool, brown is warm, and so you're going to have, now there's a couple of attempts to bring in some cool color. This was way over in the corner. Might have been a touch of the sky scene as well, and a slight attempt at it here. So what I can do and take a scene that's been painted, again, covered bridges, Park County, Indiana. I've been there a bunch of times and photographed them and painted them. And the idea is to try and find a view or an angle or a perspective or a composition that's unique, or then fill the painting with a little more feeling of sunlight or of shadow. And I'll do that with the shadow by bringing in more of those cool colors into the shadow parts of the painting. I'm going to start off with, so I don't overdo the blue, I'm going to start out with a little bit of a yellow ochre going into the sky. So I'm going to have a touch on unity a little bit, and I'll show you a neat little trick for focal point at the end of the painting with my spray bottles as well. So let's touch on. So again, that same checklist that we had way at the beginning, hopefully you bring that back out and look at it frequently, because that's going to be, your guide. A painting needs a better design or a better composition or a better value plan. It needs a focal point. It needs some unity, balance, harmony, direction. We'll touch into those. And that's what I want to adjust here just a hair, is the unity of color. So I'll bring in some warm yellow ochre into the sky. And when you do this, you have to kind of paint it beyond what you think you're going to end up with. By that I mean, it looks too strong too soon, but guess what? Watercolor is transparent. It's going to dry lighter. So you have to kind of put down what you want to end up with, even though you don't see it the way you want it. So I didn't need to go that dark with the yellow ochre, but guess what? By the time it dries, it's not going to be that strong. So look at how transparent it is here. So even though it might look very strong there, it really isn't. And so you'll have to just do it a couple of times where you did it and then it dried and it wasn't enough and you had to do it over and made it stronger. So we can do it, look at it upside down. And there isn't the stark, isolated look of that blue compared to the rest of the painting. So it has a warm colored harmony throughout the painting, which is an important little element to have. So I have affixed the color harmony. The next step, although I won't do it on this one, but it could have been, so lucky you, I'm not going to cut it in half at this moment, but we'll have to join this in another way. Compositionally, the bridge is right in the center, and the space left and right. Now, by the time I put shadows, you're not going to notice it in the center as much, and that will link the left and the right a little more for you. There's a bit of a focal point happening on this half of the painting right in here, and there's another focal point happening on this painting right over here. So I've got to decide on just one of those as being the primary focal point. The other could be secondary, and so that's a concern that I have, and I'll make that adjustment later on. But my point is, if you can have something a little bit more dramatic in sunlight or in shadow, and I'm going to go with shadow on this one, having some long, rich, bold shadows, as immediately you're going to see these patterns of shadow linking left and right, connecting, these parts together, and that will be something that is more interesting than seeing just the object. If you recall earlier, what I have done to the barn, this is no longer a barn, it's about the sunlight. And so here's an example of early on, it could have been these sunlight colors adding to the subject. So once you've been able to paint it this way, I congratulate you. The next time, do it with something a little bit more dramatic. First suggestion for shadow colors, same color, slightly darker touch of blue. And so we're going to have there be an interesting pattern of shadows on one side. I'll come up to as well, this is an ultramarine, alizarin crimson, burnt sienna mixture. So it has a really rich darkness to it. And I'm very careful of the design, so I'm constantly, concerned about the design. And so that's not the exact way a shadow should be for that roof line. But as I'm doing here, I want the pattern to be interesting. There's a thick and thin to the shadow instead of this, architectural look to the shadow, perfect architectural look to windows and doors. And so that's what I'm taking and doing here. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to create a pattern of the trees casting shadow on a portion of the building. So that little dappled look that would be for trees is a way in which this building to be linked in with the actual trees. And so now I can do some shadow parts to the trees as well. So a little value shift, but mainly I'm bringing in some shadow patterns as a way in which to rescue a painting. I have a section of trees that are darker and a section of trees that are lighter, so I'm playing with lights and darks. I'll do that same lights and darks down here as I showcase where the fence might be. Nice strong contrast. Here's that alizarin crimson. Great rusty color. I use it for rocks, European buildings a lot. Alizarin crimson, ultramarine, and burnt sienna. But I'm going to do it with positive and negative. By that I mean part of this fence you're going to find because it is dark in front of light. I'm going to take a cool color, and put it into the inside, so there's some shadow patterns to the inside as well. Play up some contrast here. Avoiding a straight line for that edge of the building going down. A couple of notches in it. So see, just that subtle little, avoiding that straight line and that subtle little thick and thin stop and go. And maybe we could have a little fence post here. Let me sketch it in first. Yeah, got a fence on one side, let's have a fence on the other, and I'll use the dark of the building to showcase the fence post. Here's where that wet media acetate would be a way to play with this idea of this darker value as an experiment first. Get a feel for it. But I saw a fence on the other side, meaning over here. I thought the idea of having fence. I'm going to showcase what I call pure art. By that I mean there is fence post showcased because it is light in front of dark, and now there's a fence post being showcased because it is dark in front of light. And I'm exaggerating the size shift, so I have dark in front of light. So here's that artistic way of painting elements and taking this out of the realm of realism and detail and having a purely artful view. So my palette colors, I'm thinking about the question previously. Linda, hopefully she got the idea. I'm going with what colors are in the painting. I would have had a different color sequence. I wouldn't have used much burnt siennas throughout. It isn't wrong, so don't misunderstand. I'm not saying it's wrong. I might have had a bigger range of fall colors to have, making it more interesting. But that isn't an error. So just because it's a favorite thing to do for me, I don't want you to feel like it's a have to do all the time for you. I could just showcase a little more orange in some of those tree colors. You have it here, so I'm just to make me think of it. Some of this orange over here. So there's a little color shift. As we get deeper, we'll have a warm green. So here's introducing a little more color. So color can be an issue as well. As I'm increasing shadow, I'm increasing the value change, and I'm also increasing it with a variety of color. So I have a little trifecta of repairs going on here, but that's what I'm looking for, is to have some patterns of shadow. It just breaks up the very architectural look by having that leaf pattern cast across the side of the building. Having value shifts while I'm doing it, playing with dark in front of light, and here's a fence post that's light in front of dark. And while I'm choosing some of these colors, other than just same color, slightly darker touch of blue, I can add a little color shift along the way. So here comes a touch of a warmer green, just to give the viewer. So these color changes takes the place of detail. So that's the purpose of those color shifts. Have a little redder color and a little rustier red color going on for that part of the building. So I've got an orange, I've got a red, I've got a violet, I've got a brown. Here comes a blue. Yes, a blue. In the event this becomes my focal point, primary, I'll have the color be a little cooler. It's a touch of ultramarine and cobalt. There's a little cast shadow of the bridge itself. I want to have a little better edge. Looking through the window possibly. So I'm orchestrating what will be the focal point at the same time. I'm going to deal with some high contrast. That's kind of an obvious choice for the focal point, and here might be a little surprise, less obvious choice for the focal point area. This little high contrast, there's a broken board there or two. It's all about a design change, not to being a straight line. Coming up with a cleaner color green coming up for this being a focal point choice. It's the only section of the painting might have that cleaner color green. Got the high contrast. Got the smaller little brush stroke patterns and marks. Darker leaves. Let's go for green, darker leaves. And we'll have a little touch of some summers, a bit of a canopy shape here. I'll fix the shape at the same time. I think I'll link this particular tree into the rooftop. It's a nice little focal point zone. So I'm altering that shape. Another bush or shrub on the ground, or another tree, I think, as well, only so we can have different sizes of tree trunk. And let's get into some cast shadow patterns. So I have different sizes to the tree trunks, not the lonely singular one. A burst of blue, I'm going to come up with a phthalo blue. It's kind of reserved, that phthalo blue is a kind of a specialty color that serves the purpose of being for the focal point. Something extra that nobody else has, that kind of intensity of the blue. Even some of the patterns on the rooftop over here using a color that's reserved for just that section. So that brighter blue. So instead of having the bright blue in the sky, I'm saving it for the focal point section of the painting. Now I can continue with, I want to just make one little shift here. I can't do it there, I've got to do it over here. Just a feeling for the open sky space here. I want to have a section of the trees go all the way across and into the sky, or above the sky. I think I'm trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm thinking about what I'm doing, and then, oh, by the way, got to give you a description of what I'm doing. So instead of having the sky be around this whole area, I want to have a section of the sky blocked out. So it's a composition change. This tree a little taller in one spot, a design change. And now back to one of the things I wanted to do in the early stages is to have a little stronger play of some shadow patterns coming across the scene. So that what will happen, you almost need to take a picture at this stage too, so that you can see this, because these shadow patterns will just give a looseness, a little more painterly appearance to the painting, to the art. Not quite so architectural, or creates design patterns to enjoy. And here they come. I'm going to clean out the palette just a touch and come up with some, using that similar combination of color. You have a lot in this particular painting. There's a lot of cobalts and burnt siennas. And big brush, no small brush for this to start with. That way you make big, bold shapes. Here comes a ultramarine as well as burnt sienna. And so I'm using the shadow patterns as a design form. By that I mean just abstract shapes instead of being specific. So I'm going to play with strong light and shadow, 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 and not having them be the same or parallel to one another. Take some strong shadow. Now I keep in mind where am I? I'm close to the focal point, so I want to carry some of these shadows to be a cooler color. So here comes a cobalt and a peacock blue in it. So that way it helps enhance the effect of a cooler color in that zone area, focal point zone only, primarily. So this is creating both the shadow effect and a strong play of lights and darks, which is what shadows do. Create that beauty of lights and darks. Some of the light that's in the front of the painting I feel is a little too light. I want the eye to go with the light that's in the painting, not at the bottom. So that's why I'm eliminating a lot of the light value that's in the front. We can add a touch of a warm green for a little dry brush shift over here. So really a fun class, and it's a very educational form as well. That's why I like this thing that I do in my workshops, and I do it in now this specialty technique class. You get to see a lot of painting and lessons. So we're covering a dozen paintings and 7 different principles or more. Taking that shadow, linking it across. Not having the shadows be parallel. Notice how the angle of this shadow is different than that one. So if I take my brush, you can see I've changed the proportion, changed the thickness, and changed the angle because I'm making art, not for any other reason but that. Instead of, in reality, they would be straight parallel to one another. Dry brush for something different on the ground. I have another tree that's taking and not having that canopy of that particular tree. I'm going to do a dry on this and show you a great little technique that you could also employ, and that's where the spray bottle can help enhance your eye to stay inward in the painting. Well, just one of my rural barn tricks. I don't know why, but it sure changed the idea of having it be just that straight line, straight line, straight line all the way along. Then I'm going to break up a few boards. I mean, the covered bridge wasn't built this year, so it's okay for a few broken boards. But what I get out of it is not having a perfect straight line. So just a few of those little notches, one a little higher than another. The placement is different along the way. The idea of the chimney just broke up the straight line, gives me a feeling of shadow, which is what I'm showcasing in this painting, are the strong shadows. Even curve that shadow. Look at the shadow came down, then it curved over, just because I'm making art. So here's something you can do to help enhance the painting a good number of times. So here I'm doing a store-bought spray bottle with yellow ochre in it. Oh, I got 2 of them, good. So I'm going to quiet down the contrast of light value and edges around the 4 sides to get the eye to stay in the painting.
Tom, you should say that's fine mist also.
This is, you can get these at the dollar store or grocery store and whatnot.
No, but it's
the
a
dot
fine
bottles
mist.
that put out the pattern of dots. So what I'll do is I'll spray on the back to give you a little feel for the pattern. Is that what you're said? I didn't hear it very well.
No, saying that that's a fine mist.
It is the
you're
fine
using.
mist, yeah. This acts like an airbrush. In any of the store-bought spray bottles now do fine mist. There used to be 1 or 2 that did dots. And so here it's like having an airbrush. So instead of using an actual physical brush or a big brush, I can slowly, see, I can just add this light little coating. You hardly can see it, but I'm adding this light little coating of yellow ochre on the 4 sides, letting the white that's in the painting kind of glow and radiate even greater. And so this, by shading the 4 sides, what I'm doing is I'm pushing the eye in to where the shadow patterns are the best. And because the shadow patterns are stronger on the ground, I'm going to let this be the focal point area. And I'm not going to have that one be it. I'll have that one be secondary. I'll bring back a cool color over here. I didn't want the face of the building, it was too obvious as a focal point area. So I feel this area here really shines quite a bit. So what I'm doing is I'm taking away any light value or high contrast that might be seen away from this. So I'm getting this to radiate more and more and more. And there's one little section in there that I want to spray. Had I used a brush, I would not know if I had it correct. I might have to double and triple brush, meaning keep brushing until I had enough pigment transferred. And so the spray bottle, you could just keep spraying 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 times. 1 or twice is all that was needed here. A couple of big dots appear every now and then around that outside of the painting. So now that I like the pattern on the ground, more interesting than the pattern on the building. So I'll let this be primary and let the architectural design of large go into small, get you back over to kind of a secondary area of emphasis. And so let's take that peacock blue and add a color that's only going to be this clean, this bright in this area of the painting. And so I have a few white areas of white paper, where I can put this tint of color on it. And so it'll just stand out a little stronger. So you're seeing that blue be a little bolder in this section of the painting, which is good. That's where I want you to be. And I'll put a bright color on the ends of the cattails there. I'll put a little higher contrast on the fence posts now that I have decided. So I didn't want the wall to be as exciting as I do now. I like we'll take another fence post here. So there's pure art there. It's dark in front of light. Here's light in front of dark. Now we're back to dark in front of light. Just these little dots and dashes, little ruts in the ground. So I'm helping play up. The emphasis is in this area. And then now a nice bright orange for a few of the cattail, weeds, whatever, accents in this section of the painting, helping brighten up that color. And you can see it. You can see it on the monitor. I can see it like you see it. Look at how this area glows. And so that becomes my primary. You come over here, stop over there. The tree stops you from leaving the painting by having this other tree, which now that's a little too cool of a color. I'll put an ochre over that one, where I had these cool colors here before, thinking about that. I don't think the green takes away from it necessarily too much, but let's take a look at it behind a mat. I don't think I have a mat so I'll use the two corners. So you can take and improve a painting, and here's a scene that's a perfect scenario. It has been painted really 1,000 times before, and beautifully. And the thought is, you're going to do 1,001 and hope for someone to like it, only if you can do something a little different or unique by introducing, sunlight and shadow. Here's an example of a painting in my book where I've taken a cafe scene and I've introduced the feeling of sunlight on it, the glow of the sunlight, the yellow, orange, red, violet, splash of the sunlight, sunset colors upon the scene, instead of doing another. A cafe scene in Paris has been done 1,000 times before, and mine would be 1,001. But now this is like a whole new venture. This is number one, and that's a number one view for that particular covered bridge because it hasn't been painted quite like that before.
We have another question.
Fire away.
So did you use the spray bottle of ochre because
Yes.
it's a warm dominant painting?
Yes.
Would cobalt be used for a cool dominant
Absolutely. So here's a painting where I used cobalt blue around the outside. And so I took away the brightness of this color. I got rid of the white. Any of the bright greens had a cobalt blue. So this was cobalt blue on top of the finished painting. Look how bright these colors are. These all were the same as this. So a cool color dominant painting where I wanted to enhance the warm, I used a cool color. And I didn't do any spray here. Your first time out, you might want to put a Kleenex or a tissue or, block it so none of the spray lands on that particular section of the painting. But that's where I took a cobalt blue spray and I got rid of the white of the cloud, toned down the bright yellow that was yellow-green that was on this particular section. Didn't touch any of this focal point area. And so a cool color dominant painting, a cerulean blue if it's a light value painting, or a cobalt blue if it is a darker value, is that particular one. This is a warm color dominant painting, and it could have been a way I could have fixed the sky as well by doing this fine mist spray of yellow ochre. I did a brush there. So the finishing touches on a warm painting stay with the same colors. Then the opposite, those little cool colors that I put in towards the end, they will radiate and glow even greater. So there's a fun fix where you're taking and emphasizing a good painting, which it was, to now become great by dramatically introducing some shadow patterns. So we did some value study. We did some color changes. We talked about composition. We did some cropping for some success. We did some sunlight and shadow. So I think we earned a short little 15-minute break. And let me come back and talk to you about unity, focal point, foreground, background, having an exaggerated theme, and lots more to share with you. So I sure appreciate you having some fun with these. You get to take and watch the rerun and click a picture of the before on this one so that you can see that we have done something pretty exciting as far as that change. All right, I'll be back in about 15 minutes. All right, you having as much fun as I am? Yes, I hope so. And a great learning process is what really I found of this. Sometimes, just the demo that I do, it, start to finish goes through, but here I can solve all the different painting problems. And I tell you, the best thing, so there's a lot of changes that really helped me as an artist along the way. Got a good sable brush, stopped using, toothbrush to try and paint with. Little things like, porcelain palette when I saw colors expand. I mean, I had plastic palette for 20 years, so it's not, the only thing, but little steps along when I stopped looking at the photograph. As a guide to make the painting, I made more artistic decisions and was more creative looking as well. And so that's when I also didn't let a painting win. And that's how I learned how to do night scenes, was I took failed day scene paintings and figured I'm gonna just keep working on it till, something exciting comes out of this or interesting. And I would teach myself a lot. And then probably a very important part of this whole process is be able to paint with confidence. And so if you know what you were going to achieve, it's just a matter of get out of the way, here I go. And so having a painting win and just be there, okay, I start over, I'm gonna get to that same problem that I had before. Start over, get to the same problem. How do I break through? By fighting that painting, whether it be, as we showed you, cropping or some dramatic shadows or value changes or improve the focal point composition, things like that. It helped me become a better painter. That I knew that I could then, if I could see a mistake happening or something wasn't gonna be the best, I figured, oh, don't worry about it, I can fix it later. So if you have that thought in the back of your mind, oh, I can fix that particular problem later, or I can just crop it off. Okay, then keep on painting. You maintain a nice positive direction while you're making the art, and then you'll be able to do a better job of making those paintings. So there's a thought behind the idea behind this class, is that it can teach you a lot along the way. I just have fun with it at the same time by taking what could be good to become great, as we have just done there. So let's continue with the process and share with you the idea of now, how about unity? I'll grab one that says that behind me and bring you into play. So that we talked a little bit about a couple of the other ones. There's several different forms of unity. One can be, the color harmony of the painting. And so this is a warm color dominant painting. There could be, as I showed you, the other one that I sprayed could be a cool color, dominant painting. So let me go to my trusty old workshop charts that are in my book. So if there's a warm color dominant, look at how everything just holds together. And then now I have a bonus component, the opposite of warm. Cool to have that focal point, stand out even greater. Here's the same scene. Here it's cool color dominant, just a quick wash to get it started, but saving warm, for the focal point in the painting. It could be bright colors everywhere. So here's bright colors throughout. Then I rely on contrast to hold the eye in the painting. And here's a little different version where they've taken and come back towards the end and add some calligraphy, which is a great idea. I'm all for it. But it needs to be done everywhere, possibly a little bit more. And so you might want to introduce, so you could have this, section down here, as your focal point. But even throughout the grass, even throughout some of the branches, even throughout some of the leaves, I'm wanting to take line work and adding it both in thick and thin, which they've somewhat done. So let there be just individual little leaf, pattern ideas, but make it more prominent. So it was kind of a half and half. Half tone showing where everything is, and then coming back with a little bit of line. So it's either a lot of tone and a touch of line. That's like in the paintings, I came back with just these little dots and dashes. So that's like what I'm calling line work in my focal point area. Or do as I'm doing now, a lot of line as the dominant part of the painting. So I'm wanting to have one component, in this case the line, be what it is all about. It's all about there being line. Another building, another little shape here. We'll take one of these and have the tower be slightly different than the other. So they're not both the same oval top. So we'll have a little peak top here. Another window or a square window here, 2 windows on this one. I like the flat roof that is showcased on this one. I like the pitched roof showcased on this one. We'll have the look of the water, some pattern for reflections. That's the only reason I put the boat in sometimes is so I can show there to be. And even real subtle in the sky. So the sky didn't before match having any of the calligraphy, let's call it, or linear look in the painting. And so now there is the look of this line work throughout, very dominant, very bold, in your face. Before it was kind of half and half. And we still, I feel, have a little focal point area. I'll pop a little color over on this side as well.
Tom, the shape between, right in there, the shape between the 2 branches is like a big diamond.
Here, this one here? The orange one?
I'm not, yeah.
I'm going to carry that orange over to the other side. You're right, thanks. After I calligraphy a little bit of buildings and towers. So adding more rooftops down here in the valley. So now there's line throughout the painting everywhere, and we'll take and just pop a little orange again to this side. A little water to dissolve some of it or lighten the value here and there. Take it on the other side of the tree. It's a tangent. That orange comes up and stops at the tree. Now it carries through to the other side. A little of the phthalo blue, the little specialty color for this focal point section of the painting. Got the high contrast working for me as well. Touch of red. Cleaner red, there we go. Do a little shading change as I change the peak of the roof a little bit to hide that oval arch instead of them both being the same. So again, unless someone is saying they want a painting of this place, then you really can't make these kinds of architectural changes. But for the rest of the world that doesn't need to know where this is located, they can enjoy the very creative painting look that you have. Stylized as it is. So I'm doing a little more focal point contrast, extras. But that real strong dark did a great job. I'm going to just hit it with another little pop dark. Bring it up to that, yeah.
Somebody said, no, the diamond is higher between the trees.
Oh, this shape in here, thank you. Yes, you're a good point.
Right in between the trees.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I didn't see it.
I know you're
I'll turn it upside down. I can then help us all see what you're talking about. This shape right in here, absolutely. Just two symmetry on both sides. Thank you. I was thinking this diamond shape there, I brought that orange, carried it over, but yay. And all the leaves seem to stop on the same plane. It helps me bring across. Who did that, Linda? They did a good job. Good call. And I'll do a few more branches on one side compared to the other, and that will, I just enhanced it by putting both those branches. Yep. That was a good fresh eye that noticed that particular aspect. I think just because of that prominent tree, I'm going to suggest another small little wispy one over on the left-hand side. Maybe Gives the loneliness of the tree on one side, or only. A little smaller one, different colors. Value change. Keep it clean. Got a nice sense of clean color as well in this painting. So instead of just having the tree, one single tree, I brought these leaves down lower and over the branch as well. Got rid of that shape. Thank you very much. I still feel we have, and let's pop a, I just got to take that dark. I made it darker, and now I have to make something else a little darker as well. So I'll make part of this tree trunk darker, part of this window darker, shading under here a touch darker. This overlap being darker. Another window-like shape. Otherwise, the loneliness of that one dark spot. So now there's darker in this section, be it the grass, the ground, the roof, the window. So I brought that orange over to the other side. I'm going to put a little yellow-orange on this one. Look at it behind the mat, and here's a good example. Look at that special spot of dark in the painting, and I'm going to enhance that spot of dark, our focal point, by putting a light matte, and your eye goes right to it. So much so that do you see something of one of these in here? Just like you've caught that one, I'm going to fix this square one right there. And so I'll put a couple of yellows in front of that rectangle. Got to just dry it a touch. I like what the dark did, I just don't want to have it to be a dark rectangle. And so I'll force some dark yellow bushes or shrubs. Got to wait for it to dry, otherwise it won't show up as a dark yellow. A little bit of line in the sky, a little bit of lines throughout the distance, suggestion of line in the lake or the ocean that's there. Or even once more. So I like what the dark has done. I just didn't need for it to come off quite as a rectangle dark, and a hint of this orange over on this side as well. So it wasn't just a single orange in that one spot. So you have a focal point. You still have value change, but you also have the calligraphy dominant. And a good number of times the unity factors are a color or a type of edge, soft edge dominant or hard edge dominant, but here a unity factor in the style of the painting as well. Sometimes having the style of the painting being simple or complex. Let me share with you another chart. And so here are unity elements as well. So the look of this particular ocean and island and rocks and so forth and trees, very simple and loose and stylized. But here is the same thing. I got rocks and ocean and trees, but it's much more complex, several different value changes and edges and so forth. And so the sky had to be even, more complex as well and showing edges at the same time, because that's what's happening, edge dominance. Whereas this guy doesn't need hardly any edge, just a tiny little one over there. So the look overall, and I have that problem a lot of times with, in class, a student has a painting and they decided to have the sky be soft, and they called it a resting area. And I didn't want the sky to be that different than the rest of the painting. So let unity be one of your factors for an important element in paintings. So focal point. Let's have focal point. And so as you look at this, and I'll let you pause for a second. I'll let you see it up particular close. And the question I pose to you is where does your eye go? And half the class might say over to the yellow, half the class might say to the tower, someone might have picked out the pink. And that is telling me that there isn't any one prominent area that the eye wants to go to that's going to help, lock you in and hold you there for a long period of time. So the biggest difference between pictures, an illustration of the photograph, and paintings, works of art, is a focal point. So having a focal point changes it. It gives the viewer a sense of where to go. We know where to go. You want to go into this particular, high contrast, dark and bright color section of the painting. You might enjoy other elements that are there, but that's where you want to come back to and home in on. We had that earlier. That's where you're going to home in on, is where that sunlight and shadow is brightest and most attention getting. So that's what this painting needs, and all paintings need, is a focal point. So that checklist that we saw way back when, that's your go-to candidate for making an improvement in a painting. There is a suggestion. I'll quickly give you a little idea. So you have the rectangle of the painting. I divide that in half and in half again, and these in half and in half again. Avoid having the focal point right in the center. We move that one painting of that street scene. We move that focal point slightly, out of the street. We moved it from here over to there, so it started here and wasn't just in the center. So you have these 4 candidates for a focal point, but they can be slightly enlarged. So here is, based upon this rectangle painting, and if you did this long, skinny, painting as well, and you divided it into half and then half and half again, 16 squares, it's these inside, 4 squares is a good location for the focal point to be. Now, if you want to exaggerate height, yes, you could have this go a little bit taller or lower. You want to exaggerate width, you could move zone number 3 or 4 slightly off, being in the center. So that's a possibility. So that's what I want to look at, is finding a couple of those zones. This zone up on the top, left or right, nothing is there. So it just tells me I'm not going to choose that for the focal point area in the painting. I'll choose this bottom left or bottom right. And so there we can go with that. No, so then we'll choose opposites. You have that bright yellow roof, brilliant choice. And what's the opposite of that yellow is purple. That then tells me that's the color I want to have for this rooftop, to have that opposite color stand out. Now I'm going to go to just a red, because I already have a touch of blue on that roof. There's that infamous chimney trick. I'll introduce a color that's only in this section of the painting. Here comes the phthalo blue. I might take away that underneath the roof line and introduce this phthalo blue. So here's a color reserved for that focal point. You have the yellow, you have the opposite you can use to attract the eye in that particular area, and you also have the component of contrast. So we can build a little stronger contrast. I'm going to choose this tree to make darker instead of that one, because I have the white of this building, and I can bring that white to jump off the page just a little stronger by having this darker tree nearby. Back you off just a touch. There you go. So now I can smooth out some of those little shifts. Notice in doing the color to the side of the building, I didn't have to make the entire side of the building be that particular color. I'm going to take a little of my Opera Rose and put that as a touch of color underneath it. Roofline Eve, and also on a touch of the ground, so a specialty color. Some of these bright reds, and so now that area seems to stand out a little bolder. And I want to share with you a little design trick, composition trick, by making the fence in front much larger. And it's going to be kind of a bold statement. So I'm going to make a little composition change. And that is, I got to do a value change first. That sky needs to have a value change. We fixed that in one of the previous ones. Remember the sky, on this street scene. We were able to change that value. And so I want to fix that component first. Let me go light at the top, dark at the bottom. And then I'm going to show you a neat little composition trick, because I have another one that shows that same idea. So a better value change in the sky. Then we could just have a touch of edges, because you got a lot of edges going on here. The sky kind of lost some of its edges. A touch of a little violet shift slightly. So here I need to have some edges to the sky, matching the fact that it's hard edge dominant painting. Now I have just a moisture in my brush, and I'm softening some of the edges. Going to bring in some of the warmths that are in the bottom. It's kind of a ochre, a yellow ochre in my phthalo green light. So I'm bringing in some of this. Actually, yes, it's green. And so you may not see it, but on an angle there, you can see it there. There's a little touch of a green. It's because of all these greens that are downstairs. I want to have a hint of that color in the sky as well. Got some of my edge changes. I want to go right through the tower. Now just take a blot off in the center, so it won't leave a line. So let's have, ever so subtlety of pink color. Take some of the pink color that's off the purple of the roof as well as the pink on the wall, and add that as a color change. You have a wonderful variety of color, a little springtime, colorful feeling, to the painting. But the sky doesn't have that same feel, so I'm going to introduce a touch of that same pink to the sky for a touch of color harmony. You've got color variety. It's a unity factor. A lot of color downstairs, got to have a lot of color upstairs. And here now, I can take and make a little value shift. So a little better feeling of sunlight and shadow. So instead of relying on a line to divide both sides of the building from one another, most of this painting is solid tone. So here's calligraphy line when the painting is all using tone to separate the different parts. So I want to take and kind of subdue that linear look and go back to tone, and a touch of a yellow-orange building, so it's not the only. Go brighter than that. It was a test. So I have another building that has some of that color to it. Otherwise, there's that isolated yellow, a touch of yellow. Now here's a composition trick, and that's where I have something in the foreground, very large, to establish a great feeling of distance. I find that fence a little tiny for this painting. It may be exactly what the photograph said to do, and it was exactly the right size that's said in the photograph. But once again, you're not making photographs, you're making art. And so I feel, a larger fence shape with some variety of color. So I'm going to mix up a variety of color to start with. Some of the greens, that's some of the browns.
Can you show your palette a little more?
Sure. Widen away, almost. Not so. Here we are. So before I paint any one part, this was the fence part over here, and I was mixing up some colors. So I have some browns, I have some blue and brown together, mixing a gray, and then I have some greens. And so I'm having that range of colors be as a choice, and I'm going to pop a nice super dark fence post as I move closer to, where the focal point is. So by doing this, I'm not necessarily closing off. People have also been taught somewhere along the way that you have to have an opening in a fence if you have a fence in the front so the eye can get in. My focal point is so strong because of the white, the yellow, the purple, the opposites, and the contrast that I don't need to open the gate so that you can get in. I can have this gate or this fence be a very large dynamic shape in the front of the painting that's doing its job of showcasing distance. And I'm having this fence overlap part of the painting. So I don't want to have the fence, be below. So you had the houses and you had the fence below. I want my fence to be overlapping to connect in with what's happening in the background. And so I might take the angle of the fence, go back a touch, having wire to some places, having some ground or greenery that's tall. It's interacting with the fence as well. That's also did create a little value shift. So the front of the painting has this dark, this bold dark pattern in the front. And I'll just do a wire for this part of the fence over here. So it's a little composition trick to show depth by having this, what's in front be very large and bold, a big value change difference than the rest of the painting. I think I need another larger fence post. I don't know why. I'm not going to think through it. Trust your intuition. As you now know, there's ways in which you can fix the painting if you didn't like what you changed. I just felt there was a grouping over here. Notice the angles are different, the heights are different, the widths are different, the spaces between are different. I think I'll do a crossboard over here as well for difference, a cross angle versus these horizontals. So I've shifted the angles. I've got a crisscross effect blending in with the grass in the front. So that dynamic shape in the front is helping establish the fact that there's distance. It's like being on the top of a hill and you're looking across. I'll put some vines and growth on the vines to one side, so it's not just the architectural look. And so it has breaks up the very mechanical look of the fence post as well. Close and far, and then a cooler color for the distance. And what I'm going to do for this painting, I'm going to take a white and I'm going to kind of make it a little chalkier white so as to give a little better feeling of distance and overpower with a cooler, grayer, slightly opaque with the white so that that cool color comes off. I want to shoot those, some of, not all of those, trees in the back. I want them to make them feel even more distant. So cool colors recede. I could have taken the time and have wiped off some of the paint and then let it dry and then go back and put, paint on top. I chose to do just a little Chinese white and my cerulean blue color. And I also want to add some blue to the tower as well, so as to push it back. You have a warm color in the distance. I want to push that warm color back. I might suggest a little section of trees, slightly darker. I've got to dry it for a second, sorry. So the last little bit of layering. Many of the rooftops are similar still, so I want to make a change to that. Even though the photograph said that's the way it should be, don't do it. So watch out for, and that's actually one of the lessons for repetition to avoid. So I'm going to put a touch of an orange on this roof. And a touch of a red on that roof. So there was another element there to teach to you. Watch out for same. I didn't have the exact same fence post. I even could have had a little color shift on the fence post. I'll come back and do that. Let's put a little bluer color on this fence post part. So it had a color change. I did have different angles to the fence post, but I caught myself and saw there was a color the same, just like the same color that was on all the rooftops. So here's where the photograph can sometimes get you in trouble. It tells you, to do it the same. And so let that be a suggestion for improving a painting. Take a look overall and see if there is anything that says to you the word same. Did I do the same color, same shape, same value? That's why I'm now wanting to come back to this tree line in here and have there be a little bit of a value shift. Not quite as dark as in the front. So there's a row of trees, slightly darker, middle value. I have the dark deciduous in front. I have this middle value here, and then this lighter value that we forced with a little bit of opaque created with cerulean blue and white paint. So I'm giving layers. I'm giving a row, one after another after another. So you're actually getting more depth and more steps into the painting. I'm actually going to hit that white once more. I'll take this and make it lighter. I don't have a problem with white paint. It's something I'm doing in several parts of the painting. It isn't any rule that watercolor has to be transparent. It's at the end result. Does this painting work? That's what you're coming to grips with. It's not about, did I follow some artificial decision on how all watercolors should appear transparent. A lot of the masters weren't transparent, so Sargent, Sessions, Winslow Homer, Mary Cassatt, they could put a little white paint in there. I still would invite them to be a part of the club. So that gave me a little feeling of this going further back than that. Gave a little light value to, as would be the rest. Let's, like we've been doing all along, let's take a look at it behind a mat. Just so happens it's a cream color, but that's all right.
Verena questions, it seems like the focal points are usually light. Is that true?
Well, I have the lightest light in the focal point. So good question. Glad you brought that up. I have the lightest light. So our focal point, you know, was kind of the darks and a bright color on this one. And we had the opposites, orange and blue. So we had some opposites. Yes, on a good number of others, you know, the focal point was a little light, you know, on this particular one. And definitely the focal point was this area of light on that one. But it isn't necessarily a requirement. And then once again, as I've said all along, watch out for the word same. So don't have every focal point be the lightest, you know, value necessarily. So this is still wet, otherwise that might become a little dark. But I think that idea of that focal point area works well. I gave a little feeling of distance, a kind of a compositional change that isn't, you know, ordinary. So you don't see this look all the time. And so I didn't want the, what I call the Chamber of Commerce appearance, you know, for the composition, where everything was cleared away and it was a cute little fence at the bottom, or just the way the photograph might have been to be seen as well. So I have another one that I want to talk about and enhance with focal point at the same time. So I embrace your questions and keep them coming, because that means you're thinking and learning. All right, so here's again, I'm sure you intended for the figures, you know, to be in this little grouping as the focal point area in the painting. I'm all for it. But there is a lot of distraction. You know, my eye can get caught up in over here and look at the light part of the stanchion, part of the architecture, one of the statues. And so there's a bit of distraction that's taking away from seeing that particular section, you know, of the painting. And so here's where I want to do what I call close in and eliminate the distraction. So your focal point is fine. You even got a touch of warmer color going on in there. Great stuff. Shadow patterns are a little bit in the same direction. So I'm okay with limited color, kind of a twilight look and so forth in the painting, but I feel the eye doesn't get to that focal point soon enough or isn't trapped there long enough. And then that means that there's a chance for the eye to go up and out and then leave and head over to the palette. So that's where you want your focal point to really, I feel, in my painting. So this is a personal choice. So I can't say that there's not a focal point. I can say that there's some competition, you know, for the focal point. And that's what I want to help fix if we can by darkening the sides, same color that you have. A little light in the sky going on over here. I want to keep the light in the sky coming across the bottom. So I'll try and match a little closer some of your color, your violets that you have. Looks like a little ultramarine in that as well. All right, breathe in, breathe out. Don't be scared. It's all right. It's not your painting. We can always tell in the workshop, right, Linda, when it's the person that just slouched back in their chair and gasped for air. What was he doing? Yeah, I'm going to go darker there too. And I'll bring some of that sky pattern coming slightly. So it's like a front coming through. And very dark and ominous at the top. So I'm not going to, only thing I'll do to the focal point is the shadow patterns. So there's a little better shape to them. And still want to darken behind this section of the painting. And I'm going to let a couple of these rose colors appear here. And I'll sneak a few in a minute. Yeah, I'll do it right now with my liner brush. I'll go across the building so you don't see a line. It's painted very wet, so I'm not concerned about rushing right away to fix that. I want to just break up the ending.
When we're done with this one, we have a few questions on the previous painting.
Oh, okay. So I'm slowly diminishing and leaving just a little bit. So we left that big light over here. Now I want to just have it closer to the focal point where I'll leave some of this light value. So that's where I'm just breaking this down into a smaller size now. Simpler shift over here. Where did I end there? I'm going to end lower here. I looked at where the light was, and I don't want this light to be the same level of distance, so I'm taking that light away right there. And let there be a little bit of light showing at this plane. So where I'm at up here is different where I'm at over here. We can still show some patterns in the sky. This could have been a candidate for the fine mist spray bottle as well, and it may be both. Here I'm just smoothing out where I've done brush strokes going across the architecture. You could have blocked them out, frisked them out. And now the same thing, got this light value here. I want the light value to stay there. So I'm fixing this painting by not fixing the focal point. I'm taking away the competition. And we're going to have two different directions for shadows. It's okay. One might think I have to go this way with those shadows. I don't. All I'm trying to do is enhance, enhance, enhance this section of the painting. I'll put a hill back in here because I can. So I'm taking away a little bit of the light in the sky by a cloud in front of it, softening an edge or two. I'll lace a little color up in the sky after I finish softening an edge or two here. So also having those edges matches well the very hard edge dominant that you have in the foreground. I forget the sky before if it had any edges in it or not. I'm going to darken this tower a touch more behind the dark of these. So it's either lighten these two or darken this a touch more. And this would be an easier solution. Let that be a different value change for that section in the back. So I'm having dark, middle, light value for close, middle, and far transitions. But the intention is all for helping bring out the focal point. And there was the competition of, so now I don't see that as much competition, so I'm going to darken a portion of that tower over on the left. Would you do me a favor, Josh, and plug that in for me? Thanks. I'm going to lighten the value of these. So I'm going to dry this and see if I can wipe off some of the paint. While I'm drying this, I'll create a little more edge in the cloud area as well. Thank you. Let me see if it's... We're good. Appreciate it, buddy. We did this before. So instead of having it be quite so smooth and so it just seems a touch of edge. Didn't need a lot on this one. And again, because of those dark values, darkening the tower and darkening up, creating a cloud-like pattern behind. Now this brand of paper may not be one that I can lift off and repaint on top of. I use the Fabriano. I used to use Gemini a lot. And that's a type of paper that you can easily rub off dry color, and then you can go back and paint where you've done that rubbing because of the quality of the internal sizing. So generally papers weren't made to do wiping off of dry color, or if you did wipe off, wasn't made to be going back and repainting where you did that lifting off. So I develop a painting sometimes as much by removing dry color, a little directional pattern leading the eye up to those focal points, the little lines, ruts in the road. Look at how it just zooms your eye in. And again, I didn't touch the focal point, but it's getting bolder and bolder and bolder. Now as I take away the intensity of that dark, so there's a lot of paint on top of the surface, so I'm sure I'll be able to lift off with a little more ease. Just make sure the paper's dry, otherwise it tears. Okay, so I'm doing this so I don't have a lot of contrast, at least at the top. So I might be removing some of the color at the top. Yeah, I'm pulling off paint. Now I'll smooth it out. I leave a little bit of the value that's there. So just at the top is where I'm eliminating a lot of the paint, taking away a fair amount of the contrast, especially for the street light as well. Letting the best contrast be in this section. So if you take away the competition, your focal point will speak loudly. Now on other papers, I could go back and reshade if needed, but this is all a simple silhouette, so I don't think this painting needs to have. So I wet the area, wait 10 seconds, cloth towel, that way there's more friction, clean part of the cloth towel, and then lightly rub. So it was the type of paper, that's why it came off kind of scratchy, but I can take and smooth that out. All right, need those whites there. Wouldn't doubt this is arches. I grew up on arches and I grew up on Winsor Newton, but when my painting evolved from being detail orientated and more colorful, and I wanted to be able to fix or correct mistakes, I then shifted to Gemini for a long time. Then there was a concern that they were bought out, going to be discontinued, and I have found the Fabriano Extra White. Love the white surface, love the tooth, a little more impressionistic ability with that, the fabric or tooth of the paper. Darkening a touch of this bottom, I created another little section of building or architecture, like I darkened some of the hill on this one. Getting rid of some of the line work that you use to showcase part of the building. Darken just that section between those two, so the eye will go back to this section. So taking away the competition by taking away some of the paint, lighten some of the value. It's not the same. So there's another trick for you, is to don't have the word same. If you hear the word same when you're making art, the news is not good. I'm going to take and create a little continuation of this path line by scraping. Have a little whiter value. So this is a razor blade. A little sparkle, so there's the whites are whiter. And I've done a lot of night scenes over the years, and I have, from my commercial art days, I have a little tool, it's an electric eraser. So that's an ink eraser insert into an electric wheel that spins it. And so perfect for this little situation here for turning the lights on, part of the painting. Feel that area glows. While I'm drying it, I'll just create a little more interesting pattern of the shadows from the figures. So coming down, coming across, just not so parallel as what they were before. And nor do I concern myself with they should be parallel, because that's how they are really. Realism and accuracy of where the sunlight is and how the shadows should be is not my purpose as a painter.
Is there a name for that eraser?
It's electric eraser. I don't think they even make them anymore, but that's you could use an ink eraser, you know, that just the insert. So you just have, oh, I lost it. Oh, there it came out, good. So that's an ink eraser. So you can buy an ink eraser. This just happens to be in a tool that captures it and then spins it so I can turn on the lights. So a little tissue there. So I'm actually scratching off paper, but I can turn on the light with it. It's a little radiant glow. Let me take it in close. But you see a few of those little, like I did the scratching on the surface. And I'll have the lights on this side be just that, be brighter. And a little ray of light from them. You'll see how I'm opening up those radiant lines. A little larger for that one. Lighten the window if you wanted to. And on the other side, not as much of a lifting off of the light. So there's a variety from one side to the other. And just extend this a touch more. But you could use an ink eraser, you could use a razor blade. Now this is not going to be quite as bright. It's kind of farther away from the focal point, but there is a fun way in which to create the lights. Now, a perfect candidate for having a dark matte. So I'll back you away a touch. And we helped the focal point by not doing anything to it. This previous one, we helped the focal point by adding things to make that focal point jump out with contrast opposites of specialty color. Here, we just took away the competition of what's happening on the sides, and now your eye is going to go into where you have your touches of color, where you have your lighter value, and also the directional lines of exaggerated touch. So it's like having arrows telling them, I want you to go this way. We got rid of the light value here, the very light value here, the light value over there. I left this one because it's close to the focal point. It's really right there, connected by, and if you can't get from here to here, you hop on these light fixtures. So this light value, right here, this light value, you hop on the light fixtures and you work your way to the focal point by having a little direction. So I've got directional patterns to get you there, less competition around, and now the painting, I think, works just fine. So focal point is a big and important part of making the painting more interesting. Let's do a couple more.
Can you go back to the
sure, Linda,
other one?
Yeah.
The one right before that.
Yeah, this one, I think.
With the buildings.
Yeah, I'll move you in close. Go ahead while you talk.
All right, there's like a little conversation going on. So I'll start with, would you use, no, wait, like I'm not seeing the, I have to wait to see.
Yeah, go ahead though with the question.
Okay. Would you use shadows to make the buildings in the background have more depth? And
I would probably use a different value change behind the buildings like I did here to have the buildings have more depth. I did a change here because all the buildings had the same white and same color roof, so I wanted to break away from the word same. So I had little different color changes here. And again, I felt this value was dark enough to make it stand out. That value was dark enough to make that stand out. And while I see that one, I want to take this tree and bring it in front of that particular.
And then someone else says, have thought several of the paintings he's working on are very flat before he works on them. And then
Flat
I
in
agree,
value or
he
just
will,
laying flat as the surface? I'm not sure if that.
you know, just flat with no dimension.
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then,
That's always an element that's, you know, is going to improve a
but
painting.
you're not necessarily, when you're making these corrections, you are just using one particular item that you're
Yes.
bringing out.
Yes.
So this, really, if you were doing this in a regular workshop, you would have done more to the
I would talk
paintings.
about other things. We kind of
Right.
hit a couple. We did talk about, you know, the focal point was the main issue that I wanted to get across, you know, on this one. We did a little compositional change just to have a little drama for the composition, that larger fence in front. We did a little bit of a value change by making this with the white, and then I made that a touch darker. We did some color here, so there was a color harmony. So we touched on, you know, a few other factors along the way. What I had intended for a good number of these, you know, let me hit long and hard what's first needed and foremost needed. And then as we added other elements, that became just a suggestion of the other issues that would make for a successful painting. So primarily what I wanted to get across was with composition. And I didn't pre-plan a lot of these. I did plan, you know, on all of them, what was the first element I wanted to say, and then I just used my intuition to decide on the color harmony, the composition, you know, and the color shift or the value shift for that particular scene. So I hope.
So basically, you're emphasizing one particular point on each
Yes.
one of these versus making a correction on how you would do the entire painting.
Oh, without question. Yeah, without question. So, right. So that's, you know, that's a good point. So, and the other part is too, I don't want to be too hard on some of these people. I mean, their names on the back, I won't say it out loud. But I didn't want to have it be like every principle, you know, was a necessary component. Trying to picking out what would be the first thing that I would say I want to get across, you know, and like we said, you know, focal point was an issue. And then these, you know, even you see it, you know, from a distance, you can see how you're just drawn into that particular area. Then if I added a few other elements, they weren't as high a priority. So you really have, you know, it's what I've, you know, done in all my books. You know, I divided my chapters, you know, into the components of what's needed to, you know, make for a successful painting. So it's value, color, shapes, composition, impact area, theme, which I want to do next. And so there is that whole variety of elements that are important for making a successful painting. I just kind of wanted to fix the first one and the foremost one. And so it wasn't that it was broken and needed all 7, but you know, while I'm there, while I'm drying it, let me slightly improve maybe as I did the composition on the previous one. So hopefully that gives you a little idea too, and didn't want to be too over the top on one of the paintings. All right, let's look at, since we hit the word theme, let's touch on that particular idea. Got a nice feeling here. So that same checklist that we've had before, and there we go. We'll swap out the battery in this soon. What's the reason? So we had this, you know, checklist that we had in the very beginning. Wouldn't hurt, you know, touching on it at this point as well. We talked about shape, you know, and value change, variety of color. I should touch on that one as well. And so this same checklist, and notice how it ended with theme. Every painting, unless the intent was for it to be photographic, and remember way back one, you know, nothing wrong with beautifully photographic, you know, but we still could improve, as we did here, a couple of little components of unity and focal point. So that same checklist ended with theme. So before you do a painting, you know, ask yourself, why are you painting this? There should be a reason more than just, well, I like wagons, or I like a barn, or I like things. And so all my paintings have some kind of, you know, reason to them. Here it was obviously the sunset glow and so forth, and so that could be a reason enough. It can be something simple as having fun with color and contrast. So it doesn't have to be, you know, radical, but it should have some type of reason why you're painting this, and then exaggerate that a touch. Or once in a while, as I'm going to do here, have it be all about the theme and less about the subject matter. And so they're talking about, I get this feeling of light here, but I just don't get the same feeling of the connection of that light with the sky and the water And so I want there to be this color effect in the painting and having it be the light. One of the earlier ones you could almost call this one as a theme. It's shadows. You know, it's all about the shadows. And so that's the main reason. It's not about a covered bridge anymore. It's about the lights and darks from shadows. So here the theme is going to be the sunlight colors that I wanted to have be almost the first impression, really being a striking change to the viewer's analysis of what they're looking at. So I'm going to get to a clean bucket and have there be some radiant, warm, glowing play of light as a starting point. Remember, I showed you the cafe scene out of my book as well. That's what I wanted out of that particular painting, not just things. So I'm going to go with that gold in color, lighter near that source of light, getting darker, darker, darker as it goes farther away. So I'm playing up the sunlight and the color of the sunset, the color of the sunlight going through a purple. Yeah, I'm going to run across that. Now through a cobalt and a magenta mixture. Then I'll smooth it out so it's not quite so artificial. A little warmer over to that corner, a little oranger, a little red orange as well. So I'm making this light area look brighter by going darker quicker, farther away from it. And so again, I'm taking the theme of the color of the sunset and having that be such a dramatic effect in the painting that is almost the immediate first response, first impression, first feel as you communicate to yourself what it is I'm looking at. And it's not things that you're looking at, it's in this case, the color of that sunset. I'll go a little bit lighter as it comes down. So it's a gradual change oval and it's a gradual change vertical because of the water. So these colors are matching what's happening upstairs. And we'll come back and suggest a few things, a hint of a focal point, and we're going to let the atmosphere, the mood, the feeling, the theme in the painting be the strongest part of the story. And that's what you're doing, is you're telling a story. Glow, radiance, warmth. I'm going to let a little highlight stay on the top of the hill. Going to keep it soft edge, not going to come back with any lacing of some more colors. Going to close down this slightly darker at the bottom here. Close to that light in a minute, I'm going to bring in some warmth instead of this blue. I'll open up a little more of the ray of light in a moment. We'll lift off the reflection, and we've got the backup electric eraser as well. So I want this hill to show the same radiant transition because of that light. By that I mean, here comes the orange, now the red. I can still leave a few now going into so having each item carry that same transition, light to dark, warm going to cool. Same with this one. It's got to go from light to dark, warm to cool. So it's not just a little part of the painting. I want all parts of the painting to take on this theme, this mood, this atmosphere of light to dark, warm to cool because of the sunset. making those colors appear. So this hill doesn't show that it's in this radiant, warm, glowing sunset painting, but it will in a second. So it's warmer here, picking up the warmth of the sunlight. Slowly, actually quickly, transitioning to a violet.
How do you plan a focal point when it's non-defined things like waves, etc.?
Best color, contrast, edges, and detail makes a focal point glow. A special color. The special color in this one is the white. Special color in this one was the yellow and the purple. It could have been the high contrast of darks and lights, you know, in that particular area. And so we had colors not used elsewhere. The blue is going to be a helpful component to this one because that blue is not going to be used elsewhere. So I need to take and have a reflection pattern that follows the same color sequence. I need for this one to be just a little redder over here instead of bluer. So I'm reserving that blue now for that focal point light source, kind of my primary, secondary. We'll see where the rays of light go in a minute. So a smaller amount of the blue. This is ideal how I got a little amount of blue, how exaggerated I made that blue appear. So I'm going to follow the same sequence, say this hill here, that's the color and the value to have in the water reflection area as well. And then I'll put the darker hill in the reflection at the same time. So as I'm going, matching this color slightly lighter. So I don't want to have the same. So I think one of the points, now that I'm thinking through all that I've taught you today, one of the points I didn't bring out enough, and that is another clue to what could be wrong with the painting. If you find yourself saying it's the same, if this hill was the same color as that one, or the same shape as that one, or the same value as that one. And so there could be a visual, a trick to help you find what's wrong in a painting is to not have it be the same. So if you're doing something and it looks the same, might be a reason for change. Smaller patterns, smaller shapes. You want to connect right into these rocks that you have here that are a little too well defined. But that goes away nicely now. A little light escaping through here. Now then this next darker hill in a reflection pattern. So the idea was I'm taking a theme, and here's the challenge. You might have felt when you had this painting before that you felt the sunlight had a nice glow. Well, the viewer doesn't have the word glow next to the painting, so they don't get it. So my point is you have to exaggerate beyond what you need to sense the theme. So I wanted this glow, radiant, warm sunlight theme in the painting, but I had to do much more than I needed because I want the viewer to snap immediately to get it. Not to sneak up on it, maybe to wonder if that's it or be distracted by something else. I want them to immediately get the message, and that's where exaggerating it more than what you and I needed. So sometimes you're painting the painting to help the viewer get the message. It's a 140-pound weight, so it's buckling. So make sure it's bold, it's immediate, and then in a situation where the theme is the repair for the painting, kind of hold back on. Focal point doesn't have to be quite as loud. It's still going to be there. So I just want to play out the the play of the light. Slightly darker over here, so you don't see those that well again. So I like it when someone comes right to the painting and goes, oh, I like the glow, instead of telling me what the name of the mountain range is or the name of the street scene or where it's located in Chicago and so forth. Oh, it could have just a little more contrast here. Just a little separation of value. Kind of a sweeping, wet, curvilinear play. So a dry painting, I'm going to take a trigger spray bottle and see if I can spray away some color. Got to be completely dry. So here's a trigger spray bottle, but it's a very big industrial grade, super strong trigger spray bottle. So your grocery store spray bottles have the little tiny trigger that one finger can go on. Doesn't have enough power attached to it. So I'm going to just re-roll the paper. This much painting, you should be doing it on 300 pound. And I also feel it's a little damp over here. Any bit of moisture left will come off with this spray. So I just want to expand the radiant effect and also create a little pattern of this reflecting in the water. That I'll do by lifting, this I'll do by trigger spraying off. Do more, be careful what's happening too. There's a bit of the sameness of the glow. You know, there's a ray line and a space and a ray and a space and a ray and a space, so it's a little too evenly perfectly star-shaped. So I'm going to have an asymmetrical pattern to the spray of light coming across. Put some towels and things I don't want to have get wet. Re-strengthen the paper. Josh, I think I'll bring it to your camera too. I don't know if you're backed up enough. So I'm going to bring it to an angle where you can see the trigger spray bottle. So by having you be there, I'm actually almost going to be touching the paper as I squeeze and spray, and I'm going to be pushing away from me. So you can't do a straight line by going, you know, this way, left and right. And so I will turn the paper and just do this motion only, and I'll turn the paper and do that motion only, so that it has. And hopefully, Mary, you have a sheet of paper that color will come off of. I don't know what brand it is. We'll find out soon. Certain papers, again, that's why I like the Fabriano Extra White, and also when the Gemini was available. Okay, so you can see there, I'm going to adjust the stream. So I have an adjustable stream, but look at the length of the handle, the size of the motor, you know, and a big piston action going on in here, so I can really, you know, create a lot of force. And then touching the paper, putting my hand squeezing away from me. So the whole paper's dry. A lot of it's going to get wet, but just the area where I'm almost touching against the paper, that's the place where the color will come off. A couple across the sky. And so I want an asymmetrical proportion, and just one going this way. And so it is really wet. So you can take a look at this soaking wet. And now I'm just going to lay this down and gently and evenly pull away the moisture. So it's about asymmetrical patterns, and one of them I'm going to rub at a parallel there. Different directions, thicker, thinner, one going over here. We'll dry it, and then we'll just pick off a little bit of light coming at the bottom. So kind of, you know, catch your eye, primary, secondary. and a little bit of reflection area. So the focal point doesn't scream super loud, but it has the feel of an area of emphasis. And of course, the immediate first reaction is the radiant glow. While this is drying, I'm going to take a little bit of an orange, a red orange, and put it in the place of this place that I've done the lifting. Not as much there, a little bit here, a little bit there. So taking where I've done lifting off color and putting a warm color back in its place. So I added a touch of warmth to there, is what I wanted to do. So a great way to have a painting is to give them a feel, give them a attitude of texture or patterns or contrast or bright colors or radiant glow. And so that's a way in which a common scene, a simple scene such as this, can now become that much more special because you have created an atmosphere that is endearing. That still is a little bright here, so I may take and do a little lifting off of color. This high contrast here catches my eye a touch. But first, let's create a little pattern of light being reflected and small. So I'm picking a few spots between where I've done those broad strokes. And so I'll take you in close. You can see. So I'm not just doing it randomly, but I've chosen, this is the light value in between those brush strokes before, and that's where I'm adding this play of light. See, it's between. So that's what I'm calling a brush stroke of tone here and a brush stroke of tone. And so I'm putting it not just straight down, but I'm picking those spots in between to bring down that play of light. Razor blade I think would be a little too strong, so I'll back you up a touch. So coming up in December, we're going to have, we had a lot of requests to see the spray bottle class again, to see the class with doing trees, rocks, and water. And what's the other one we have, Linda? The white paper, I think?
Saving the white paper and using it
Got it.
later.
We have set up, we just haven't listed it yet, but we're going to have now, going forward, first of the year, we're going to have some Zoom classes where I can look with you at your painting and talk about your painting. So doing a workshop class, as I take away a little bit of that heavy dark, as an addition to. We're going to have a few Zoom classes with a special topic where I'm demonstrating and talking about just something with sunlight and shadow, or something with, for a little 3-day Zoom format where I can focus on, ooh, wouldn't it be interesting to have a little rooftop here?
Explain that they'll be full, those are full day classes.
Yes, thank you, Linda. Yeah, there'll be a demo in the morning, then painting with you, offering comments on your painting, using Zoom where we can see what you're doing, you can see what I'm talking about, and then critique at the end. So we're going to mix it up a little bit with our, ooh, a little accent highlight there. Oh, a little bonus touch there. Uh-oh. Somebody's going to like to get this one back. And a couple of lighter value shifts gradually into the mountain patterns. I want to slowly eliminate seeing the light on the hill. Kind of fun catching that light here, and now I feel a little touch of light in a couple of spots. So here's where I'm able to lift off that color easily. A couple accents of light and a little color shift over there where I have them. So anyway, so we will send out some announcements about, we're going to have fun. Later in the week, I have some fun little paintings, little quick paintings. I don't think I described it well enough, the holiday paintings, where they're, I have several. I have just a painting that takes you 20 minutes, and several different ones of them as well, where that, what's why I'm referring to as the giving away a painting for the holidays, is to some fun ways to paint simple beautiful, elegant scenes, making them into a particular little gift box as well. And a lot of you already know about the winter one. We're going to do winter next week in a week's time. But here's a good one to finish on, is to have, the theme, be the reason, for the whole painting. And that's an exaggerating a theme. That's the purpose behind why your, brush touched the paper. Sure, there are other, structural components, that we have touched on, to improve the focal point, value change, unity. We exaggerated the sunlight in this particular one. We've exaggerated value change. We improved composition. We've actually cropped a painting for success, or we just enhanced the color overall to make a painting more interesting. But I think ending with doing a painting where there's a good, strong mood or good, strong feeling is a great lesson, where you can take any painting and add that particular special effect. Night scenes are a fun way in which for a painting to have a little dramatic flair to it as well. And so I've done many a street scene, before, and so I decided, here's another scene that's been painted many times, State Street in Chicago and whatnot, so have a little different view to the iconic, Chicago theater. But the drama of a night scene is also a technique that I embrace having you try as well, as a way. So not that a painting was broken, but it's more or less paintings that are good and that you want them to become greater, exciting, very dramatic and different. Try turning a day scene into a night scene for something fun. But I'm happy with having stopped here on having a dramatic mood or feeling. Any particular classes that you'd like to know about, you can send me an email. Happy to try and develop a program that is more interesting, as we've had people ask about, could I do a class? That was a message there, Linda. You had a question?
A couple. Will you continue with these technique classes?
Yeah, we have 6 months of technique classes, still all new. We're going to have some of the technique classes because of people had missed and they really want to see the spray bottle class. So we're going to have a spray bottle class again.
Several missed different classes, so they want.
The composition one, if you haven't taken my composition class, I couldn't say enough about, taking that particular specialty technique one. So every month, there'll be at least 3 specialty technique classes, and we may have the ones that we've done backed by popular demand. Go ahead, Linda.
There's 2 more. Will there be a limit to the Zoom classes in December?
20.
Next one.
Actually, the December class is sold out. So my Zoom class for Chief Joe's is already sold out. So we're going to have a Zoom class January. I'll get you the date in January.
Actually, 2 of them in January.
There's a Zoom 1 and a 2. Right, yeah.
And then Terry suggesting painting a night scene. Actually, that's one coming up.
There's, yes, I did that as a demo for one.
You're going to be doing that.
Ways of doing a night scene. So there's a class that's on that we can help you with. This is a lot of fun. I'm showing 3 or 4 different ways to do night scenes. So as my usual way, there isn't just one way, to do the night scene or a sunset or a sunrise. I like showing a lot of different ways to do it as well. But yeah, send me an email with some of those so I'll catch them and write them down should you like to know. But yes, definitely the spray bottles, we're going to share with that class with you again, because that was very, very popular and people are asking for how to do the trees, rocks, and water. Composition come January. Hope we can see that one. And because if I was to list all the priority of items, top of the list is composition. So
also lots of thank yous, and someone wants to know, how do you know when to stop?
If you have so your checklist, that I have, I'll come off camera and grab it. So, for a great question, and I'm going to sit down and chat with you for a minute on that answer. So it's the most common question asked, and I reverse that and somewhat ask the question back to you. What were you trying to say? So with every painting, after I've worked out the shape and value change and composition and focal point and sold all those priority items, it ended with the word theme. And that is also another word of saying, what is it that I'm trying to say or communicate? Not what things do I want you to look at and be able to name them off. Palm tree, Adirondack chair, Chris Craft boat. No, those are just objects. So you don't want it to be just a series of objects. So go a step further in what it is that you want to take and have the viewer feel. Maybe you were there, hopefully, and you felt the wind. paint a painting where you feel the wind, or just enjoy color. When we're doing our fall scenes, we just wanted to have the fun with all those fall colors. So have there be an underlying theme or reason that these objects are being used to communicate to the viewer. And it doesn't have to be wild and crazy. It has to be simple, 1 or 2 words, color and contrast. Boom, let's paint. Now, in doing color and contrast, you want to improve the shapes and make sure there's going to be a value change and so forth and so on. So I've given you that checklist as a checklist to fixed items in the painting that may be an error. So we have that checklist on how to look at a failed painting. I look at it when I have my pencil sketch before I develop a painting. When I transfer it to the final sketch, I double check that checklist. Then I go with what it is that I wanted extra. So I wanted, just a sense of depth, in the painting. I wanted a feeling of close and far, in the work of art. So nothing wild, nothing crazy. No, I don't care if you don't recognize where this is, on the planes and so forth. But is there a feeling of distance and depth? Mission accomplished. That's all I wanted. Here I wanted to have a feeling of the white, light, and shadows. So I have a nice strong feeling of some shadows, and I have the brightness of, here's where the extra white, made a difference in the painting. So again, it wasn't about, oh, I like this cafe with 2 umbrellas. That's not enough. That's not enough information, before starting, the painting. I see one here that I wanted to also suggest to you. And so I wanted to have a nice, rich, lush feeling to this springtime, scene. I was about to go to Wisconsin and teach, and I liked all these, roses and lavender and lilacs and, colors and flowers and so forth. So every painting needs a purpose for it. And here's probably one of the things that I waited too long as an artist. I felt that, hey, listen, I'm not ready for this mood and theme stuff. I still was trying to figure out how to hold the brush correctly and make a good job of, making marks on the paper. And I really should not have waited that long. I could have immediately, while I was developing skills, I could have developed having a theme in a painting noticed, other than just good structure of brush control, and then became just more detailed as well. So as I close out, I'm going to share with you a suggestion, and that is to take an old painting. And I talked about doing night scenes, and so I wanted to exaggerate the mood or theme of the feeling of the light. So I wonder if that would be better with a dark. Oh, for sure. Brings out the light. What was I thinking? There you go. Dark matte, light brings out the light. So a good number of times, take an old failed painting. Now, not that this was failed, but it was for a lecture for a class that I wanted to share with them. This is nice. This is good. And for me at this point in time, nice and good are not enough. I want to take and have the painting have a little more something oomph. And so I've done that same painting again, and now I have reworked it. And this time I have given it a lot more pizzazz with that limited little play of light coming across. Now by itself, if I was to see it with a white matte, that's kind of heavy and dark, and Linda would be telling me, how come I'm painting heavy and darks, right, Linda? Mm-hmm. So here, by having a dark matte, I immediately bring your eye to the last little bit of light seen at the top of the trees, a touch across the ground, and back to the building. So I'll take you back to tried to paint one that looked almost exactly the same, but that's how this was. And the point was, take a chance once in a while, just as I did the exaggerated, glow of the sunlight. Take a chance once in a while and turn a day scene into a night scene and have limited little spots of light coming across that night scene, and that'll give you a nice wow factor. So a good place to finish. I sure thank you. Sorry I went over again, but a little extra time just for you. I'll see you on some fun paintings that we're going to do on Thursday, so don't forget about that class. It's a lot of little fun 20-minute paintings at the most that are fun to do and proud to give away and doesn't have to have. So I decided something in balance to all this intensity of things you had to worry about. I wanted to show you a chance to just do some fun paintings, and then next week we're going to play with snow. So I sure appreciate you being in my class today, and we've got to do more than just 3 classes a week, or a month I should say, so we'll plan on something a little bit more for us as we go forward. So stay safe, wear your mask. I want you to be healthy so we can be in class together someday soon. Thanks for watching.
Several can't wait to take out their old paintings and work on them.
And work, yeah. Or it's too bad. Get together with a friend if you want to have some fun with this. I do this in a class. Just a quick minute. I'm having fun. So I've done one of these in the beginning of a workshop, and then all of a sudden, everyone brings a painting the next day. I go, great, everybody bring a painting. We'll fix them all. Key word was will. So I brought them home at night, wrote on the back what was needed, and then I handed them back, but not to the person that made the painting. I handed it back to someone that was sitting next to them. So when their neighbor saw them putting on some intense darks, turning it into a night scene, they all of a sudden got more brave to be able to do some exaggerated changes. So take a really failed painting or take one of your friends' painting, go, here's one of mine, you can have him work on it, I'll work on one of yours. So not worried about the end result. So, and if all else fails, turn it into a night scene, so you're saved. So have some fun with that. Any other questions, Linda?
Nope.
All right, kids, thanks again for watching. I sure appreciate you. Enjoy the night scene, the little limited amounts of lights. See you in class soon. Bye for now.